if you want to. I just needed somebody to come in who would be able to get to it.
Cool. Yeah, I just need to grab some lunch here, and then I'll come back.
Okay. So have you resumed the recording? Are we on air now?
Yes, we're on air.
Thank you very much, Ty. Okay, folks, welcome to this week's edition of Drupal Chat. Unfortunately, Blab is acting up on me still here, and it seems like it kicks me out of the session every time I start it, and then I need somebody else to help me actually recover the session. And then I lose my ability to put the recording on and to put stuff in the chat stream. So we got a little bit of technical difficulties that we're dealing with here right now, but we're going to go ahead and get started with the show anyway. And I guess I'll just make a note for people here, because I'll edit this later on. I'll probably just upload this one to YouTube as is, even with all this fumbling in the beginning. But I'll put it, I'm going to create another better edited version that I'll place elsewhere. For those of you who are watching live, if you make sure that you're on Chrome, that's going to be a good thing. Because then if you do want to take a seat, you'll have the opportunity to take a seat. I'd love to have some people take a seat with me here. And if you don't take a seat, at least make sure that you're putting some questions or your responses to the things that I'm saying in the chat window. Excellent. We got somebody calling in. Perfect. Let me accept you here. Come on, I'm saying accept. Boy, Blab is just really giving me headaches right now. Get another person on air. Welcome, Tom. Hopefully you're on Chrome, and hopefully you'll be able to get a connection. I can have up to 4 seats open, and so hopefully we can get Tom in here so he can participate as well. And then we got another couple seats that we'd be able to fill as well. So, all right, while we're seeing if Tom's able to make his way in here, I will see about getting things started. As I said, I don't have access to the chat stream right now, so I can't put the link for where the replay is going to be, but the replay will be live at teachyourselfdrupal.org. Will be available at teachyourselfdrupal.org. My name is Mark Isaacson, and I have been a Drupal freelancer for just about 6 years now. You can find me on Drupal.org at Vegan Triathlete. So I've got a list of questions that I put together that we can go over here and have, hopefully have a bit of discussion about. And so I'm going to need to hop back and forth in between my tabs here so that I can get to my question window, and then I can get back to here and talk to you as well. Tom, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kick you right now, and then we'll see if you're able to reconnect, because right now it seems like your connection is not taking hold at the moment. So let me get you out of here, and we'll see if you are able to make your way back. Let's see. Give you a chance here to get back in. Welcome as we see more new people here. There are 4 total seats. I'm in one of them. Tom is working on taking another one. Other people are welcome to join us in either the 2 remaining seats, or if Tom just isn't able to connect, then we'll end up having 3 seats that people would be able to occupy. You can feel free to do that, take part in the conversation. Just make sure that you're using Chrome because Blab works better with Chrome. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get started answering the questions here. Let me pull up my window. In fact, I think I'm going to do this a little bit different way so that I can just switch between the tabs potentially. I'll see which one ends up working out to be better, if I have my tab in Chrome or if I actually have a separate application. Oh, you know what? It's totally fine if you want to ask questions about doing freelance with any type of web development. It's totally okay. No, it doesn't have to only be related to Drupal. It's just we're focusing on working as a freelancer, specifically like with web development, but I don't care whether it's WordPress or Joomla or Drupal or Concrete 5 or Laravel or Symfony or whatever you're doing it. It's all useful information for anybody who's doing this type of a thing. Yeah, it's fine. If you want to come on, that's great. I mean, I'll work with you. If you need me to talk slower, I'll talk slower. And if you need a chance to gather your thoughts, it's okay for you to gather your thoughts. I'll give you a chance to think about how you want to answer the question. It's just much more fun to have people actually participating in the conversation. And okay, go ahead. You can set it up. And then again, just make sure that you are on Chrome. And what people sometimes see, even when they're in Chrome, is if you've got more than one camera attached to your computer, like if you've got a webcam and an external camera, Blab could sometimes get a little finicky about that. You can look in your address bar towards the right. There's this camera icon, and that's where you can choose some of your settings for how Chrome is going to interact with your hardware. So let me take a look at my first question here. And so what I was posing as the first question is even getting your first job as a freelancer. And I think it would be interesting to hear from a number of people how they did that, because I think that our experience would vary somewhat from person to person. So while I'm waiting for other people to get a chance to do here. Hey, hi, Ty. Thanks for coming back. I'm glad we got another person on air. We're just going to start talking about how we got our first job as a freelancer. And we actually have had a question from another person who's checking out the show here. You're going to think about dialing in whether this had to be specific to Drupal. And I've said, no, actually, there you are, Tom. Looks like you're going to make it this time.
How you doing?
Great. We can hear you. We can't see you. We're seeing maybe
it's kind of broken. It's a little bit messed up, but this will suffice, I believe.
All right. Well, we'll just deal with your gray wall behind you, and we'll take your voice there. So okay. Great. I'm glad to see we got a few people taking a seat here, and we'll all get a chance to take part in the conversation. So the first question we were going to be looking at was how we got our first jobs as a freelancer, because that's a question that a lot of people have. It's not even just about being a freelancer, but like, how do I even get my first job as a web developer? And folks, I'll try to remember to use the generic term web developer instead of saying how to get your first Drupal job. If I forget that, that's okay. Feel free to slap me and tell me that it doesn't have to only be about Drupal, but like, this is my life is Drupal, and so to me everything is Drupal. So I apologize if I keep making it Drupal centric. You can remind me to pull it back and open it up more. So for me, my story is that I'm old. First of all, I'm 48 years old. I'm not just out of college here. So I had done a number of other jobs before I decided to actually come back into programming again at some point. And I decided that I didn't want to do the type of programming that I was doing before. And so I wanted to do web development. That seemed like that was going to be a smarter choice. Get involved with the internet and with building websites, because that had more opportunity. And I had come across Drupal in another context before. So as long as I had started doing Drupal for some personal things, I said, well, I might as well learn how to use Drupal as a tool to do web development. And so I started teaching myself Drupal. And basically I spent, not with exact numbers, but close enough. I pretty much spent like 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months. Fooling around is probably pretty accurate. Teaching myself how to do Drupal, because I didn't really have the best strategy together. And after having done that for the 6 months, I said, okay, I feel comfortable enough now that I think I want to go out and start getting some jobs doing this. And so honestly, what I did in the beginning was I looked for job openings, and I went and I interviewed at places. And the truth of the matter is, nobody hired me. So for me, in my situation, I didn't have a choice but to be a freelancer in the beginning, because I couldn't get hired by anybody. And yet still, like, this is what I was planning to do for my full-time job. So what I did is I looked for meetup groups, and I started going to meetup groups, and I just started doing a lot of networking. Just talk to people, meet people, get a chance to hold conversations with them, and just start to get the word out there about like, hey, yeah, I'm a new web dev, and I'm looking to take on some projects. And then additionally, as it turns out, right about the time that I was getting ready to become a full-time web dev, to do this professionally, I'm in Colorado, and Drupal Camp Colorado was in June of 2010. So I went to Drupal Camp Colorado, and there was a party the night before. The camp started officially on Saturday. Welcome, Mohammed. And they had the party on Friday night. And so I went to the party on Friday night and socialized. And I met somebody there at the party. And I introduced myself to him, and it's too bad that he's not here. It would actually be nice if Salim were here right now. But so through the various networking that I had done, including going to this party and socializing with people there, I did meet somebody, and I told him, hey, I'm new at this. I'm really excited about getting projects, and so he took me on. He pretty much is one of the people that got the ball rolling for me, and so that's really how the pieces came together, is getting that first project, and then having done this other networking, there were some of the kind of coals that were starting maybe to catch fire a little bit there, right? They were starting to warm up a little bit, so that I was able to move from one thing to the next. So that's overall how I went about getting my first job as a freelancer. It was really a lot of face-to-face networking with people and making the introductions, and then just also keeping in mind that I had to present myself as somebody who is excited and eager and who was willing to work hard, as opposed to presenting myself as somebody who was like, oh, woe is me, a charity case. Because honestly, that was a mistake that I was making a little bit earlier, is that when I would talk with people, I would focus more on like, oh my gosh, I can't wait till I could get my first project. It seems like it's so hard to get it. And I realized after a period of time, like, well, duh, no wonder nobody's hiring me, because the way I'm coming across is like, oh, please, 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 you just take me on, give me a project, give me some work to do. And then I said, well, I wouldn't want to hire somebody like that either. Like, I don't want to take somebody out as a charity case and say, well, I feel sorry for him, let's see if he could do anything. That I really had to turn things around and show people like what I did have to offer. I came from a programming background. I mean, I know how to program. I had spent a lot of time, I told you, like that was 6 months really digging into Drupal. So I had some things I could bring to the table. And so when I was able to put things more in the frame of I'm excited about this and I'm ready to take on projects and I can do this, that was much more appealing to people. So now let me just kind of give everybody else a chance here. I'm glad to see we got all. See, Mohammed, even sometimes native English speakers can't speak well. I'm glad to see that we've got all 4 seats occupied. And so I'd like to hear from the other people who are here how you went about getting your first freelance job. I'm glad to see that we've actually got some questions starting in the stream here. That's great. We'll definitely come back to the question about balancing web development with the business administration and marketing. Because there is actually another question that we talk about like billable versus non-billable hours. So let's go ahead. Who wants to be next answering? Go ahead, Ty. How did you go about getting your first I don't know whether you started as a freelancer, so it's just how you got your first web development job.
I started as a freelancer. I mean, yeah, no one would hire me. I was just starting out. I spent 2 years tinkering, basically making small business websites for my wife, who comes up with like all these new business ideas. And so I made her small websites. And so I kind of started making these little projects. I come from I'm front end, but in Drupal I do middle, and I'm also a PHP developer, but I kind of learned that along the way through Drupal, actually. But my first gig was with, a friend of a friend. She wanted a little WordPress site. She wanted a little theme. And I was like, hey, I can do this. And so that's how I started is, I think I charged her like $600, and I figured I was doing her a favor. It's a tough one. Charging on these little projects when you're first learning is really a fine art. It's tough because if a lot of times they're your friends, and they may not realize the value of something. You might be charging them $200,
Right.
but it might take you like a month, right? So they may not realize that basically you're working for free, and that they're helping you with materials. So yeah, that's a tough one. So after I did like this little WordPress theme, my first big thing actually was off of Craigslist. I discovered, yeah. So there's gigs on Craigslist, but it's tough. It takes a lot of time, and it's totally not worth the time in general. Luckily, I landed a client with a pretty good budget, and I spent 2 months on a good sized project, and that kind of let me sink my teeth in. My next one was a friend of a friend, and this was actually a Drupal Uber cart site. And then it was networking, like just what you said. I went to my first DrupalCon in 2010. I started meeting other people, and I was like, hey, this is great. And this is a great thing about Drupal. I know WordPress also has a community around it, but when you go and you meet other people that are starting off as you are, and especially when you're mostly self-taught, because most of us are, you kind of need that validation. You need to be validated, like, oh, okay, I can charge for this. My time is worthwhile. Like, look, this is what I've made, and this is what I can make, and that's really important, I think, is the networking part. Then I got a job after I was a freelancer for a year and a half. And I wasn't making very much, and I got my first job as sort of an entry-level thing, as a themer for Video Maker magazine, and they were moving to Drupal, and then I learned from their backend developer, and that kind of launched me into getting a contracting gig with Intel, and that changed my career entirely, dramatically. After that, I was able to work as a freelancer it's been 3 years, and I work with lots of big companies, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, so, cool.
Yeah, that's first when you start out. That's the tough bit.
It's tough. So I do actually want to follow up. You mentioned about Craigslist. So actually, I had as well, when I was starting, somebody had posted on Craigslist, and oh my goodness, was this guy a nightmare? Yeah. Folks, you got to be careful. These people that are looking for web dev help on Craigslist, you're going to want to scope things out pretty carefully, because those tend to be some pretty rough gigs. Maybe you'll get lucky and you'll have good experience, but the probability is far higher that you're going to just run into the most difficult clients. Like they expect the most and they want to pay the least. They really don't have a clue about what web development is. So it's a route that you can go. I don't want to monopolize this. Who wants to go next? Tom or Mohammed?
Yeah,
Can
you hear me?
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of background info. I did my first freelance job. It was just a hand-coded. I started going freelance around 2007, and I really was not very successful until things started to take off, and I was able to do a full-time or complete income around 2014. I did not pick up Drupal until I got this very hefty gig, and I knew I had been doing Zencart, either Zencart or hand coding, or I had built a site with CodeIgniter, which I thought it was cool. Although I heard a lot of people were poo-pooing it, but I got this job description for a very big site. It's going to entail, still working on it now. It entails streaming classes, selling music from an aggregate media company. I started to do research on, God, how am I going to build this thing? And the conclusion I came to was, well, Drupal. We're going to use Drupal.
Yeah. And
I can tell you, I got in over my head pretty quickly. And I've been doing Drupal for about 2 years, but it's not been full time. It's been almost full time. Sometimes part time, because I'm still got my Zencart job. But I've really, really struggled. And I've not just struggled with Drupal, but I've struggled with doing business administration.
Yeah.
Running a business, running my Zencart client, keeping her going, and learning Drupal. and then I'm still a musician on top of it. And I work an insane amount of hours, you know, and it's just, I've not been a happy camper. I've not been a happy camper. And I can tell you, you guys, I need a forum like this because I feel so isolated sometimes. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky. There's no Drupal meetups. And I need a community. It would be very helpful for me. So I'm glad to be here. And thank you for putting this on, Mark. And it's good to hear from everyone today.
You're very welcome. Tom, so tell us again, I think I missed her. So how did you go about getting the first, I don't care whether it's the Freelancer.
Oh, it's word of mouth.
Okay, so you just happened into it.
I was a front end guy for a corporate gig in New York City at the time. And I came into a little bit of money. I was doing some freelance music, and it was very premature, but I left my corporate gig, and I did some very small hand-coded websites. I did not know WordPress. I sure as heck didn't know Drupal. And it was very risky to be going freelance like that. You know, I was really kind of undercooked in that way. So, but it was word of mouth. It was word of mouth.
Okay, so you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And I had somebody else actually. So let's see who that is here. Robert was telling me, thank you for setting this up. You're welcome, Robert. And I got a bit of confirmation previously from, well, I don't know your actual first name here because the way that you put it there, but lead developer, giving me a bit of backup about Craigslist and the perils of going that route. So we're on to you, Mohammed. Give us an idea of how you went about picking up your first web development job.
First project was very difficult. I did not have any portfolio. I'm actually not just a web developer. I'm a graphic designer as well. And I did not have any portfolio. So in 2008, I started working on Freelancer.com. And I offered my client that I will design first, and then you can decide to hire me or not.
Okay.
And that's how I got the first project. So I worked first, and then they liked my work and they hired me. My first client was from UK, and then I continued working on freelancer.com and got many clients from USA and UK.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
so we actually have heard like a variety of approaches. For me, it was just face-to-face networking, getting my name out there, and finally coming into contact with somebody who is willing to take me on, and at a reduced rate. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about how you decide to set your hourly rate, although we do need to be careful about this because we can't create the impression that we're doing any price fixing here, like we're trying to figure out, oh, what's everybody going to charge? But definitely for this first project, I needed to get work. I wanted to start building a portfolio, and I started at a significantly reduced rate. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more because there's different strategies of the way that you can handle this. There's some perils in starting out at a low rate and then trying to raise it later on. I mean, I successfully did it, no problems, but it's not the only way that you can go. Ty was saying that pretty much he started doing like some projects for friends, doing a little bit here, a little bit there, and start getting some pieces together. Tom said that it was like he just happened into a word of mouth and he was able to get on a project. And Mohammed actually came up with a different approach, saying, I'm gonna go to somebody and I'm gonna do design work for them, and I'm gonna show them my design and give them a chance to get a sense of, like, do you like me or not? Do you want to continue and actually start paying me money to do this? So those are all options that you can keep in mind for those of you who are new at this, and ways that you can go about doing it. I'll throw one more out there. Another way that you can approach this is there are very often not-for-profits that need help with their websites and web development, and that's certainly a way that you can start getting your hands on actual projects, building actual websites, and you can do it like pro bono for not-for-profits, because at least that way you're doing something nice for a not-for-profit, and at the same time, you're getting that experience, you're getting that exposure, you'll have something in your portfolio, and like I said, you'll be working on a real problem. And that's one of the things that I think is so key. Tom mentioned, like, he found out right away that he was in over his head. Well, I'm not saying that we want to get ourselves in way over our heads when we do things, but the only way you're really going to be able to learn and get good at doing this stuff is to work on actual projects and have to solve actual problems. And it's in the process of solving those problems that you'll get better and better. And ideally, the way that you approach it, like for me, I work on enterprise level projects now. I use Drupal as a framework to build custom web applications for clients. But when I started out, it was just a typical marketing brochure websites. Like, let me just start using Drupal to go ahead and, do something for people. Hey, welcome back again. I mean, I know we've seen you here before. I know that you're not a big Drupal fan, and that's cool. This isn't limited to Drupal, but let's kind of keep the conversation clean in the chat window there and not get too crude about things. All right. So let's go ahead and move into the next question here. And I mentioned this that we'd be heading into this idea about how we set our rate. Oh, I guess one thing that I want to do before I jump into that, I see Wave Foundation saying that you're buying the Drupal learning course. That's awesome. I don't know if you're talking about one of my courses on Udemy or if you're purchasing somebody else's Drupal learning course. But glad to hear that you're jumping into Drupal and this got you enthusiastic about learning it. Okay, we'll come back to the question as well about what's the difference between WordPress and Drupal. Although I don't want to get this totally derailed, get into like arguments about WordPress and Drupal and Joomla or Laravel or Symfony or Django or Rails or all this kind of stuff. But we can maybe touch on that quickly at some point. Let's get into how we go about setting our rates. So what I had done, what I mentioned that I had done in the beginning when I started is the approach that I took is I said, I'll start out at a significantly reduced rate. And significantly reduced is all relative, right? It depends what part of the world you're in and it depends who your clients are. But for me, I'm in Colorado. And actually in Colorado, Drupal is really highly in demand for some reason. Wow. Once you develop your skills, like you're pretty well set. Jobs tend to keep on coming through to you. So what would be considered a low rate in Colorado is maybe not the same thing as what would be considered a low rate in other parts of the world. But at any rate, no pun intended, when I started out, I brought my rate way down low, just so that I can get some projects. And the way that I approached it was that I said, hey, I'm basically getting paid to learn. And so I'm not going to sweat it too much, how much money I'm making on this project here. I just need to get some actual projects to work on so I can start building a portfolio. I can start getting some word of mouth and start getting some references from people. Then what I did is, as my skills improved, I would increase my rate. I'd increase my rate as new projects came to me. As new people came to me, I said, well, now my rate is, such and such, and that's a process that I've continued to follow from that time. Is I was doing work at a certain rate, and I was busy. And then as I get new prospects coming my way, I would say, well, now my rate is something higher than that. And then I'm able to start filling my queue with those. And then it just keeps on working the way up the line from there. As far as like trying to get more specifically into, but really, where do I set my rate? I look at the knowledge that I have, the skills I'm able to bring to the table, and I do have an idea of what the general market rate is in my area and, for people with my skill set. So I position myself, in the beginning, I positioned myself on the low end of what I felt the market rate was. Now I've moved myself more towards, maybe not quite as far as the middle end. I'm not on the low end anymore, and I'm certainly not at the top end. And I hope that gives a clear enough answer. If people feel like I'm waffling too much and not getting into enough specifics, go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat stream and we can come back to me. But I want to give somebody else a chance now to talk about how they go about setting their rates. Oh, and I guess one thing final that I'll mention is when I set my rate, I'm one who does consider it like time and materials. Although there's really no concept of materials when you're doing web development, I don't really go for the flat bid projects, the fixed rate projects. Honestly, I feel like that's just a way for one party or the other to get burned. And I've really stayed away from, well, just tell me what it's going to cost. When you're starting out, you might have to be a little bit more willing to do a flat bid on a project, just so that you can get the project. But for me, the way that I do things, the way I handle this with my clients is like, you pay me for every hour that I work. And I am willing to, and we'll get into a question about how we handle the contract. So I don't want to get too ahead of that, but I do have some way that I can go about giving them a ballpark figure.
Yeah.
Now that I've had a chance, you ready, Ty? Go ahead, go for it.
Yeah, I do something similar where it's spaced by the hour. I don't have different rates. I think one time I did that where like, here's my administrative rate and here's my actual working rate. Yeah. Then there's a researching rate, and it really didn't work out at all. So what I ended up doing is I have one hourly rate. Right. And the thing is, people have budgets, and so they do want to know an estimate. And so based upon my past experience with the kind of project, I would give them an amount of money, an estimate based on my time, but you really have to emphasize it is based upon your time. And I do it either twice much, either double or triple the amount of the lowest. Right. So here's the lowest amount it's going to be, and here's the highest. And I'm trying to aim somewhere in the middle. But as we know, scope changes. You can have a module in Drupal that's not, you can have some little issue, some little bug that you didn't know about, some new request. That's just kind of how it goes. I initially set my rate based upon, I took a community college class from a friend of a friend, and I know how much she charged because she had a lot of experience, and I figured I was worth about half of what she was worth per hour. Okay. And so then over the years, I kind of bumped it up. Now, one of the problems is it's hard to increase your rate with the same client. So what I did was I kept my old clients on my prior year rate. And so I would increase it like at the actual calendar year. I'd say, okay, this is my new rate, and it's going to go up by an extra $10 an hour, $15 an hour, something like that. And my prior clients, I would keep just one back. And I think that I kind of emphasized that they're getting the last year's rate. I think they appreciated that. And then after a year, they would have to come up to the prior year, and they would be getting a discount. The thing is, one of the reasons why they're getting a discount is because they've been my clients for so long. They're easy to work with, so it's actually totally worth it for me, regardless. even if it's a prior rate. Okay. Yeah, and then up until last year, I had a rate. I had kind of met my ceiling of what I felt like I was worth, and I worked for. I was a contractor for a company, and we brought on a new guy. And the new guy was asking way more than I was making. And our skills were comparable, but in some ways I had a little higher skill set in some areas, and PHP development, actually. And then I was like, I think it's time to raise my rate. And I couldn't do it with that contract. It was a big organization. And luckily, I ended up changing contracts. And so my new contract to negotiate a rate that was identical to his. So that's kind of one thing that you discover is like, what is the going rate? Like, what's normal? And it takes a lot of research. It really does. But you find these things out, when you work at a company, and I think it's important to share how much you make. But it really varies by place. Like if I lived in Costa Rica or I lived somewhere else, I could charge a completely different rate than I do now. I live in Bend, Oregon.
Okay, and I'm in Colorado, and I think Tom said he's in Kentucky. Mohammed, where are you?
I'm in Pakistan.
Pakistan. Okay, Pakistan is a completely different situation. I actually have colleagues who teach on Udemy who are in Pakistan, and for them to actually be able to live pretty well in Pakistan, they could live pretty comfortably around like $1,500 a month, basically. Yeah. So the rate you need to be able to get.
Yeah, I was going to say that my approach is different from you.
Go ahead.
Because what's low for you might be enough for me. So.
Oh my God, I know.
Yeah. So my approach is different, and I work on my online marketplaces. So my rates depend on other bids as well. So there is so much competition in online marketplaces, and we have to match the price as well. But I don't go very low. I count in the hours I will be working on, and then I give them price. But for me, one thing is good, that the client I have worked for before, I can increase the price with them, because once we build the trust, once they know that I'm honest and I'm sincere with my work, then they are happy to pay more. So my
Okay.
approach is different.
So it sounds like maybe you're doing a flat bid for the project, though. Are you
Sorry.
doing it hourly, or are you doing it just a fixed bid?
Yeah, fixed bid. I prefer fixed bid, but yeah, sometimes I work on hourly basis when client doesn't want a fixed price, but I prefer to work on fixed price. Yeah.
Okay, there are actually some advantages to fixed bid as long as you're able to put together a clear contract. We'll talk about how you set up the contract in a little bit as well. Tom, do you want to have a chance to talk about how you go about setting your rate?
Well, yeah, I'll chime in on this. I've been I have a couple of mentors, and I was, advised that I really need to raise my rates. And I have met some resistance from my ZenCart client. She's paying by the hour, but I've had to, I've been on her job for a couple of years now, and I have increased my rates. I'm doing for her a lot of bulk image processing, and I mean hundreds and hundreds of images get processed. So I'm trying to work out a deal with her, giving her a price break, because I basically got a little mini factory set up where she's just got thousands of product images. But I think for me, the challenge is in giving someone an accurate estimate of what the job is going to be. That's what that's what the challenge is for me. This big Drupal job that I mentioned earlier, I did a flat rate. I bid on the project, and it was stupidly low. I mean, like I said, I just didn't know what I was getting into with Drupal, and I just seemed to have to learn things the hard way. But I know now I will never do that again. I'm hoping that as I get better and more experienced, I can give the client an accurate estimate of what it's going to cost. That's for me what the challenge is, and charge them, a good hourly rate. I mean, there is a ton of skill involved in what we do, guys. I mean, there is just so much skill. I'm doing front end, I'm doing back end, I'm doing the middle end. Sometimes I'll do some design work. So I mean, we deserve to get paid, man. And I'm doing it. I'm getting there. But this is, I think, and this also leads to other areas where like enforcing payment agreements is very important.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah, that's another question that'll be coming up.
I'll let that go for now. But great question. That's my answer. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll circle around to that. Yeah. So to have a look at things that people have said here. So one approach that nobody did mention, and this is something that if I were mentoring somebody who is starting out right now, I would say another way that you can approach things is, so Ty had mentioned, he looked at a going rate and he said, you know what, I think I'm worth about half of that. And so he charged half of that. Another way that we can approach this same type of thing is to say, well, that's a market rate. I'm going to charge that market rate, but I'm only going to bill my client for half the hours that I put in. That's the way you can balance things out so that you still feel like you're being fair, that you're charging them a fair amount based on your skill set, because maybe you recognize it's going to take you twice as long to do something as it's going to take somebody else. And so you only charge them for half your hours. Now, where you need to be careful with that is, first of all, if a client is looking for a certain calendar time frame for something to get done, they aren't necessarily going to be thrilled about the fact that you're charging them only half the hours that you're working, but charging twice the rate that you really think they ought to be paying you. Even though it works out the same dollar amount, they may get a little bit uptight about, but it's taking you a long time to finish this, and we're not really interested in having somebody that's taking this long. We'd actually rather have the person who charged that hourly rate who is able to get it done and half the time. So be careful, with that approach, that you aren't doing that type of thing, that you're getting yourself so far in over your head. You got to be able to balance things well enough. But the advantage of doing this type of thing, of saying that you're going to charge twice your hourly rate, but you're only going to charge them for half the hours you work, is you started with a different baseline, and you don't run into that same kind of resistance if you came on to somebody as the guy who was like way, way low. And then, as Tom says, like, we have skills, we know how to do things. And even if we've had to learn how to do them, the things that we know how to do and our ability to learn how to do these things is something that's worth money. And we do deserve to be paid for it. And it can, if you set yourself up with a really low hourly rate, it can be hard to bring that rate up later on without having to go to a different client. I mean, maybe you go to a different client, and then somewhere down the road, a previous client wants you to work again, and then you can come back with the rate there. So that's it's another approach that you can take with doing this. So thanks for the pitch there. Yeah, so the link there, I'm building a Drupal curriculum on Udemy to help people learn how to do Drupal well, and eventually I'm actually going to be building a how to become a successful web developer course as well, where I'll go over a lot of stuff to teach people, like, how do you go about doing this? It's more than just about the skills that you know. So thanks for that advertisement that you put in there. I appreciate it. So, okay, let's take a look at, so we've gotten a comment here about that you don't count research hours. So I'm actually going to talk about that point a little bit now, Steve. I don't know if you prefer Steven or Steve. So this idea, because that ties into as well the notion of a fixed bid project. And so one of the benefits that you can get, all right, I'll make sure to remember to call you Steven. One of the benefits that you can get with a fixed bid project is that you don't run into this scenario that you're feeling bad, maybe like it's taking you more hours to do something than it should have been taking you, and now you don't know what to do, and are you going to bill those hours or you're not going to bill them, because it's fixed bid. And so you get the work done, and as long as you meet the requirements that the client had, everybody can be happy about it. But then, of course, there's the potential downside of it, like Tom's mentioned, that if your fixed bid is too low and then you just get eaten alive, that you really didn't come close to what you should have given as the fixed bid, then you're kind of being unfairly exploited. But again, you can look at that and you can say, but you know what? It's the cost of the education. I'm being educated now. I'm being paid to learn, and yeah, I'm getting eaten alive at the moment. And if I actually calculated my hourly rate, I might find out that given this project, I would have been better off going to a fast food joint and working behind the cash register, because I didn't even make minimum wage on this job. That happens sometimes, but it's all part of the learning process. But to try to avoid some of that, there is some things that we can do to try to give some estimates of hours. And this applies whether we're doing it as a fixed bid project or whether we are doing this, we're going to do it, I want you to pay me by the hour, but Ty kind of mentioned, I'll try to give them a range. And so when you look at estimating projects, there's some ways that you can approach this. And it kind of ties into what Mohammed had done with one of his projects, where he built a design for them first. And he said, look at the design and see if you like my design and if you want to hire me. Steven said he doesn't charge for research hours. So I'll give my answer of how I go about estimating projects for people. And then again, we'll go around the panel here and we'll give people their chance to say how they go about estimating their hours. What I do with clients, there's a certain amount of time that I'm willing to do with just the initial client conversation that's off the clock. You're describing your project to me. This is even with clients that I've worked with before. I'm in this situation right now. I've got a client I built a website for before. Now he wants me to do another website for him, and he got on the phone, and I spent about an hour and a half or 2 hours talking on the phone with him about the project to get a general idea of what it is that he wanted. And I pitched some ideas. We could do it this way. We could do it that way. And that was free of charge. No problems. That's just kind of getting the project started here. I'm willing to give you those hours for free. Same thing when new clients come to me. If they can give me an idea of their project, I'm willing to give them a general idea, a ballpark figure of where I think the project is likely to come in. But I'll do the same type of thing as Ty. I say, okay, based on what you're telling me, I mean, I don't have a requirements definition here. We don't have any type of contract, so I don't know what's going to change. But based on what you've told me right now, it sounds like you need, can somebody help me out here? There's this thing that says share last 30 seconds. Are we still on air? Are we recording?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I have no idea what that share last 30 seconds means there. Maybe what it's going to do is going to create like a little GIF of it, and it's going to share it out onto the Twitter sphere or whatever. Okay, they're changing the interface here with Blab. I'm seeing you never know when it's going to change, so that just threw me off a little bit. So what I'll do with the clients is I'll say, based on what I've heard you tell me right now, I'm going to give you a quick, like, off the cuff type of estimate. And then I'll do this type of thing. I think it's going to be from this to that. And I'll give them sometimes a pretty broad range. So for one example, a project that I'm working on right now that I did get the project, I had talked to the person. I said, okay, what you're describing to me, I know for sure there's no way I'm going to get this done in 40 hours. That'll never happen. This is way more complex than 40 hours. I might be able to get it done in 100 hours. I know for certain I'd be able to get this done within 300 hours. And honestly, I'd be kind of shocked and embarrassed if it took me 200 or 250 hours. So that's in the range of what we're looking at here. And what he went with for getting started on this project, he said, okay, we're clearing you for 100 hours. So he went with the 100 hours. And I said, okay, well, that's fine, but we're going to make sure that we prioritize your needs. So bing, 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 let's get these certain things done within those 100 hours. And then, he went with the very lowest end. And I said, I think I could probably do it in 100 hours. I didn't say I guarantee that I can. So I'll do that same type of thing as I'll say, this is the range. If somebody wants me to lock down a tighter range, a more specific number, then what I tell my clients is, this is discovery hours and you've got to pay me for discovery. I mean, I'm willing to dig in. I'll do more research. I'll ask you more questions. We'll get to more specifics here. But you're going to pay me for those hours that I'm doing discovery with you. Yeah. And what I'll deliver at the end of discovery is I'll help you create a complete requirements definition for what you're going to do on the project. And then you're free to decide whether you're going to hire me or you're going to use that requirements definition to go shop around for hiring somebody else. So it's a similar thing is what Muhammad did. He said, I'll give you a design. You can look at the design and you decide if you want to hire me. If somebody wants more specific numbers, I say, well, you're going to pay me for discovery. But at the end of that discovery, you're going to have a document that you can use that you'll hire me to do the job or you'll hire somebody else to do the job. So that's basically how I approach estimating. I'm willing to give you an off-the-cuff ballpark figure. I'm willing to spend about an hour or 2 hours on the phone with you to get an idea of what that estimate is. But if you want something more specific than that, then you're paying me for discovery. So Stephen, I actually do, I guess maybe when you're saying you don't count research hours, maybe you aren't even talking about estimating the project. You're talking about researching things that you're going to use there. Let me throw it open to somebody else now about how you go about addressing this issue of estimating hours. Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this was initially this was a problem for me when I first started out because I would write these proposals, I would spend like 2 days on them.
Yeah.
And I would have very specific solutions. And so they would be like, here's my features, this is what I need. And I would spend like 2 days, looking all this stuff up. And, a couple times people took my proposal and took it somewhere else and said they could do it cheaper. Right. Of course they could do it cheaper. I already did all the initial work. Yeah. And I did it for free. That was a big mistake. I spend a lot less time on proposals now. They're much, much shorter. I keep them on a single piece of paper. Mm-hmm. Maybe if it was more elaborate or more work, I would do more. But yeah, discovery is part of it. That is an item, and discovery has a separate estimate. How long will it take for me to research Drupal modules, which will fulfill this, or WordPress? Different WordPress plugins that will solve this. It's really, really important to not over research something. You have a tendency to, because I'm really curious and I want to look everything up and I get really into it. But when it can kill your business.
Yeah, this whole RFP, when we're putting out an RFP, I never do RFPs. I'm like, you know what? You just screw a bunch of people when you do that. This whole RFP, what you end up getting out of that is all of this documentation from people who are bidding on your project. You're going to choose one of those people. So you get one person wins. all the rest of these people lose. They've put in all these hours to put together their proposal for you, and then you get all the benefit from it. So yeah, I never go that route. Anybody who puts out an RFP, I'm like, sorry, you're not the client for me. I don't do that.
And the thing about research and discovery is that is actually a huge part of the job. Just across it. Like that's a massive part of web development is just discovery, because even in things are constantly changing, and there's no way there's like 21,000 Drupal modules. Like, do you know like the issues in all of them? Like that's, you know, completely impossible. So that is a huge part. You're going to spend a huge amount of time on research. That's part of programming.
So who wants to go next, Tom or Mohammed?
I'll pass on this question. I'm all ears. Thank you.
Okay. All right, cool. Go ahead, Mohammed. What do you do in terms of giving estimates? Because you actually do fixed bid projects. So let's hear from you about how do you go about knowing that you're going to put together a good fixed bid so that you don't end up eating yourself alive?
It's been so long I'm working online, so now I have idea which project will, how much it is going to take time. So what I do is that if it's about web development or brochure designing or flyer designing, then I never bid on hourly projects. It's impossible to work on hourly basis. But if it's about fixing a website or clearing virus from website, or you know, the small jobs, then I can accept hourly jobs. And then I tell them that if you want to pay low rate per hour, then I will work at least minimum of these minimum number of hours will be 5 or 10. You know what I mean, right? Are you getting me?
We're saying if they want that, they've got to guarantee you a certain amount of hours.
Yeah.
If they want a low hourly rate, they still need to guarantee
Even
you
if I finish
a minimum
1 hour or 10 hours, I will charge this amount. Yeah. So that's how I give them price. Yeah. But if it's about web development, then it should be fixed price.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're comparing that project to other projects that you've already done that are similar, and you're saying, I have an idea of how long it took me to do this project, and so I feel comfortable setting this fixed bid.
Because
and
it's a long distance, right? I do not have local clients here. I have clients from US. Yeah, so how can I count hours and how we will manage this? So that's why it's difficult.
So this is something that over time a person can develop the ability to do as you've worked on a variety of projects. You do get a bit of a sense of this sounds like, and I know when I've done this in the past, it's taken about this much time. Now, another question that's an interesting question that I don't think we'll actually get into here, because I've got a number more questions for us to talk about, is the idea of how you you can say amortize or spread out the amount of hours that you spent on things. Because is it really fair for when you're doing a project the first time that client has to pay all of those additional hours, but now that you've gotten better at it, you're able to do it in 1/5 the time, everybody else after that gets to pay only 1/5 the cost? So, what I would tend to look at more with your idea of it takes me roughly this amount of time to do this, is that some of that is still going to be a little bit weighted, because your later clients who get the advantage of the fact that you've done it so many times and you're experienced and you can do it so much faster, that it's not like, it's fair enough for you to tell them like, well, I know you're not just going to tell them literally, but you may know something is going to take you 20 hours to do. I can do this project.
I tell them that it's not about how much time it is going to take to finish the work. It is about how much it took the time to learn this.
Right. Absolutely. That's spot on. That's spot on. And that's a thing that you need to be good point. That's one thing you need to be very careful about when you're doing fixed bid work. Clients love the fact that it's a fixed bid. They're just, I know exactly what I'm going to pay. But then when you get it done, like, bing, then you can have so many clients that come back. You're like,
sometimes I have to take more time.
They're like, that's not fair. You got it done so fast. And you really have to be able to tell them, like, look, A, you wanted the fixed bid. You didn't ask me how long it was going to take me. We agreed on this fixed bid. B, you should be glad that I got it done sooner rather than later, because now you can use it. And C, just what Mohammed said, you're paying me not just for the amount of time that it took me to finish this project, you're paying me for the skill that I've developed over time that's allowed me to do this. So very good point to keep in mind. If you're doing fixed bid work, it's not giving a fixed bid just specifically on how many hours you know it's going to take you to do that project. Tom, did you want to ask any more questions about this fixed bid? You said you were all ears and you were going to pass on it. Do you want us to cover anything else, or?
No, I'm good. No.
All right, let's jump to the next question then. So we're going to talk about the payment arrangements and approaching the contracts with your clients. And I think Tom had maybe started to talk about this, and I said, okay, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. We'll come back to that. So we're coming back to it now, this idea of payment arrangements and how you deal with contracts. And so I'll kind of kick it off here and give my thoughts to get us started. So even if you're doing a fixed bid project, a typical way to handle payment arrangements is that you'll say something like, for instance, it might not be this exact split, but for instance, you're going to pay me 25% up front. You're going to pay me 50% when I'm halfway through, and you're going to pay me the remaining 25% when I deliver the project. That's one way to approach payment arrangements, particularly with a fixed bid project. If you're doing an hourly project, it's generally a good idea that still you have the client pay you some money up front, some amount of money, because you want to know, first of all, that the client's got money to pay. You don't want to get into things, and once you've done a certain amount of work, you can never take that work back, even if you haven't delivered. So here's another proposal that we've got from somebody here: 50% down, 50% completion. These are all personal things. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's just that you want to keep it in your mind about how you're going to set up the payment arrangements. So one of the things that you do want to know is that the client has got money to pay you. You don't want to wait until after you've done the work to find out if they've got money to pay you. It doesn't matter even if you were doing it on your own server and you say, I'm not delivering this till you pay me. You've still put in those hours to do the project, and you can never get your hours back. And one of the things that it's important for you to help clients understand is, like, they might say, well, why should I give you money up front? How do I know you're not going to take the money and run? Well, we have to have enough trust. But you do have a way that you could, if we've got a contract, you can take me to court and you can sue me to get the money back. But if I'm, as a service provider, if you don't pay me, I can't sue you to get my hours back. And so you really have to be careful as a service provider that your hours are something that you're putting in there that you can never recover. A client can recover money. Another piece that I'm going to say is that you want to be careful when you're billing as you go. If it's not a fixed bid project and you've got we're going to pay this much at this point, this much at this point, this much at this point, it's kind of more of this estimate ballpark. It's a little bit open-ended. Is that you want to bill your clients frequently enough so that A, you don't run up so much of a bill that they end up stiffing you for. And then you're like, well, great, I just got cheated out of all these hours and now I need to move on to another project. You only want to leave yourself hanging out there so much. And then the other thing, not worrying about whether there's the trust or anybody's looking to cheat anybody, is that it's much more helpful for clients to be billed more frequently so they get an idea of how much the project is costing, and then they can take measures to change things if they realize that, like, wow, I didn't know you worked this many hours. I didn't know that we ran up this bill this much. Can we kind of tweak what I'm saying the requirements are right now, because this is starting to be more expensive than I thought it was going to be. So you want to make sure that you're collecting money as you go along. And one of the reasons for that is, because I'm just going to wrap my answer into not just the payment arrangements, but the contract arrangements. I'm speaking from bitter personal experience here, folks. I got to tell you, I don't care what lawyer you hired. I don't care how great a contract you have. I don't care how explicitly it lays things out. If you have somebody who ends up not paying you, the only thing that contract allows you to do is to take them to court and potentially win a judgment against them. But winning a judgment against somebody doesn't mean that you're ever going to collect the money. I can tell you at this very moment, I am owed about $30,000 from people who haven't paid me, and I've got lawsuits against them. But where I am at is like, do I want to spend more money on a lawyer to keep trying to chase him down more and more and more? So great, I have a contract. I've got a court judgment that's in my favor, and I still haven't gotten the $30,000. So the recommendation that I make for people in terms of what do you do with the contract? I'm like, well, a contract's nice. It can help maybe prevent misunderstandings, but it isn't necessarily going to guarantee that you ever get paid. And so you need to be more careful about the payment arrangement side of things than about the contract side of things. Because if they don't give you the money, it's just a nightmare to have to chase people down to try to get them to pay you. And your time is already shot at that point, and now you're having to put more time into it. So that's my more than 2 cents, because I know I'm Mr. Chatty Cathy here. So I'll turn it over whoever wants to go into payment arrangements and contacts now.
I think online freelancers are luckier here.
Right.
Yeah, well, yeah, you've got the
yeah,
you've got like the escrow account that you can use.
That's true.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ty.
Yeah. So I have written contracts that I make clients sign. Right. They're not really worth anything, but it's still worthwhile because it's about having an agreement, and it's about having a set agreement. It's something you can call them out on, especially when you have a medium or an organization where there's multiple people. It's important who's signing off on this, because most of the time the person that's signing off is not the person that's actually writing you the check. Those are different people, so it needs to be really clear. This is the rate, this is the payment arrangement, this is the actual agreement. I have different amounts up front depending on the scope of the work. So if it's a really small project, then and it's someone I haven't worked with before, they're really small, then I'll take 50% down, 50% completion. On larger things, 33% up front or 25% up front, something like that. But it is important to take something up front. It's extremely important because it's big organizations, even small organizations. The person that agrees is different than the person that might be paying you.
And it depends. Like sometimes when you're dealing with bigger corporations, they've got something to lose out of this. And if you've got a contract with them, it does actually make a difference that you can enforce a contract and they're going to be more likely to pay you. And then plus with contracts, one of the benefits of a contract is at least it makes the expectations clear and there doesn't have to be any hurt feelings about who was supposed to do what at what time. So I'm not saying not to do contracts. I'm saying don't rely on a contract is that's your guarantee that you're going to get paid. A contract serves a different purpose than getting you paid. I'll give a chance for Tom and Mohammed to talk. I also want to just kind of throw it out there. If there are other people who are actually looking that they'd like to be able to take a seat, please just put a note in the stream so that we know if anybody here should give you a chance to take a seat with us. So just let us know if that's the situation for you. So Tom or Mohammed, which one of you wants to talk about the payment arrangements and contracts?
I'll chime in really quickly. Having things written down just makes everything clearer for everyone involved, and everything I've heard is spot on. They don't guarantee you get paid, but they do make it clear to everyone what the agreement is. I'm even thinking about on these two big jobs. I feel like I have to do everything wrong first to learn the right way to do it. But
we all do.
I was done without an agreement on these two, my big Zencart job and my big Drupal job, and I didn't have a written agreement for either one. So I was considering even doing a Drupal web page with the agreement, and all they got to do is using a web form, like click the checkbox. I've been thinking about doing something like that. I invoice my Zencart woman once every 2 weeks, and I'm meticulously clear what's on the invoice, what I did. I must spend 15 or 20% of my time just doing business administration, and that means tracking what I do, and then I hire other contractors on Upwork to do work for me. I have to track what they do. So I'll just throw this out there. Recently, I took over image optimization for her job. This pushed the hours up significantly. She's been having a meltdown lately on the amount of invoices the amount of the invoices lately. So nobody likes financial surprises. So when something comes up where the amount is going to increase, you got to talk to them. I should have talked to her before before I did the work. I should say, look, you just gave me 100% more additional work. Are you aware that this is going to push up your costs 100% more? You know, and then it's just another lesson learned, you know. So, but I'm not on a really tight payment schedule. It's every 2 weeks, and I'm meticulous about what's on the invoice. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Yeah, and to that point, what I do with my clients is I will use Google Sheets. Yeah. And I'll create a spreadsheet in there, and I'll share them on the spreadsheet so they can see pretty much real time how much time I'm spending. And I put meticulous notes in that spreadsheet, like here's the date, here's the time I started, and then I've got my notes column, and I put in that notes column like what am I working on right now, so that they've got that opportunity. They can monitor it real time if they want, even before I send them an invoice, that they can see how many hours are adding up. But definitely, I agree with you that documenting what you've done is important. And I think as well, I think depending on who the client is, like invoicing every 2 weeks, it really depends. Like if you're just creeping out the hours during the course of a week, you might even want to invoice them after a week, because you might have done enough hours that like, holy cow, they just need to know how much they've had to spend during this past week. But invoicing every 2 weeks can be a good idea. And then it depends, like, I don't know what your payment terms are, if they're net 30 or whatever, but like if you just get in this cycle of invoicing every 2 weeks and they're net 30, every 2 weeks, that means you should be seeing a check coming in, and you at least know you've got that rhythm in place. And so that you're staying on top of like, okay, I'm pretty much being paid. Mohammed, what do you do in terms of and Tom, actually, you did already lead into the next question we're going to be asking. So we're going to be coming back to a point that you made. How do you deal with the payment arrangements and contracts with your clients? And maybe your situation is a little different because you are doing stuff through like Freelance and Upwork, Mohammed.
Yeah, it's completely different. And when I place bid on any project, if it's a new client, then I have to get 100% milestone. I do not work on 25% milestone or 50%. It should be 100% in escrow. But once the client is on Skype, and then I can accept 50% in advance, and then 50% after work is done. So once the trust is built, then everything is fine. Everything works fine.
Okay, so you're saying that actually when you first get involved with a client, and you've got the advantage since you're going through these freelancing platforms, that there is the notion of an escrow account.
Most of agreement is done by them,
Yeah, and so the client can feel comfortable saying, yeah, I'm willing to put all the money into escrow because it's in escrow, and I know that I don't have to worry about Mohammed running off without doing any of the work.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that is an advantage that you have.
Most of the freelancers are from Pakistan and India, and most of the clients are from UK and USA, so it's hard to build the trust. It's a very long distance, so escrow is very good for that.
Yeah, escrow is a wonderful way to be able to do things. Okay, let's continue rolling along. Tom actually brought up the point about how he's spending his time, and we actually did have a question earlier in the stream that related to this. Let me see if I can scroll back and get to that question that was in the stream so I can restate what the person was asking, because it was a good point. I'm not sure if I'm not seeing it quickly here. Oh, balanced development, what we're good at with business, admin, and marketing. And so that's the question we're going to take up right now, because it's not just about the marketing and the business administration. There's the customer relationship management. There's a lot of things that you're going to have to do as a freelancer that really aren't going to end up turning into billable hours. And so I want to talk about the idea of billable hours and how we manage our hours. So when you look at a typical work year for a person, if you figure working 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that means, factoring in the typical 2 weeks vacation, that comes out to 2,000 hours a year that you're talking about. And that's a way that you can use to prorate like what you expect your hourly rate to be based on what would be an annual salary. And of course, if you're working on your own, then you got it doesn't work out exactly that way, because you got to pay your own expenses, your own health insurance, but then you also have business write-offs for the taxes. So it's not a one-to-one comparison in annual rate as an employee working for somebody else versus working for yourself. Even though companies love to tell you about that, like, oh, but we give you all these benefits. And it's like, yeah, I know you figure that 50% of my salary is benefits, but I can tell you that my health insurance doesn't cost me 50% of what I'm making. So the employers try to play this game too as well about the whole benefits package. So you don't pay quite that much, but a way that you can look at it is figuring 2,000 hours a year is like a standard amount of hours that a person would work. And then of course it depends, some people who are exempt employees, they end up putting in lots of overtime hours and they're working more than 2,000 hours a year. All this kind of stuff, you just have to kind of take it and say 2,000 is the number that we're looking at. That's kind of the benchmark that we use, even though there's all these other variables. When you work as a freelancer, and I've been doing freelance web development now for about 6 years, but when like 1997 to 2001, I was also a programmer, completely different language, completely different environment. But I was a freelancer then too. It was called contractors then. It wasn't called a freelancer in the dark ages back then. So I have a fair amount of experience being self-employed and billing people. And I can tell you this, there has not been 1 year that I've come anywhere close to billing 2,000 hours in the year. Not 1 year that I've even come close. Some of that is a matter that like, well, I can charge a good rate as a contractor or freelancer and I just choose not to work full time. But some of that is also a factor that, like you say, you're spending time doing invoicing. You're spending time doing marketing, relationship building. You're spending time talking to prospects. You're having to, look at getting your next project set up. So you've got other things that you need to be doing. And if you really want to be able to bill 2,000 hours in a year, you're going to have to recognize that you're going to be working more than 2,000 hours a year. And honestly, you got to probably figure that you're going to be spending 25% of your time as non-billable. So if you're planning to build 2,000 hours a year, you're going to have to figure that you're probably going to end up working 2,500 hours in that year. You're going to be working another 25% on top of that. And so the question is how you want to manage your time. Now, part of the way that I deal with this is, like I said, one of the benefits of having a good skill set and being self-employed is that I don't really care whether I build 2,000 hours a year. And in fact, I'm not even looking to build 2,000 hours a year. One of the reasons I like to be a freelancer is that I don't want to work 40 hours a week. If I just wanted to work 40 hours a week, I might as well go work for somebody else. I know I'm on the clock from this time to that time. I'm going to get paid a certain amount. And when I'm off the clock, I get to do whatever I want. Because even though I don't care about billing 2,000 hours a year, particularly with being somebody who can work remotely, I don't have an office that I go to. I work at my house. It's kind of hard to ever not be working. This is a tricky thing that you can run into as a freelancer. It's like, yeah, I quit working for somebody else so that I could work twice the amount of hours only to make, make how much money, So balancing this, you're going to have to recognize that there are hours that are not going to be billable hours. That's just the way it is. You never recover all of your hours. They're just things that you need to do. And so you've got to decide where the hours are going to come from, and whether that means you're going to work overtime and work extra hours, or whether that means that you're just going to recognize that you're not going to bill the 2,000 hours. The approach that I take with it is I say, I don't care if I bill 2,000 hours. There's not been 1 year that I've come anywhere close to 2,000 hours. I suppose I might have gotten close to, I think there may have been some years that I actually billed over 1,000 hours. But honestly, for me, if I bill 1,000 hours in a year, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty good with whatever I do with the rest of the 1,000 hours. So that's my take on the billable hours versus the non-billable hours. And as far as how I spend time marketing, I guess let me answer that question. That for me, fortunately, right now, once things get rolling, and again, I'm not trying to make this too Drupal centric, but this is the reality. Like, if you're good at Drupal, it just seems like the work starts to come to you at a certain point. So honestly, I don't actually have to spend too much time marketing now. When I was first getting started, it was like 100% marketing because I didn't have a project and I just needed to get my first project. But at this point, people tend to find me and tend to contact me. So it's not so much time that I'm spending marketing as much as it would be spending time that I got to have like those initial client conversations, or I'm getting, I'm pretty tough when people contact me to see if I'm interested in a project. I pretty much lay it on the line. I'm like, look, here's my hourly rate. I only work remotely. I only do Drupal, blah. So I mean, like, I just nail them with it right from the beginning when somebody contacts me, so that it takes me like 2 minutes to at least get past that initial filter to see if I even want to talk with them more after they've contacted me. So I don't even tend to get eaten up too much with that type of stuff. So let me go ahead and throw it open to somebody else here. What you do,
Okay,
billable, non-billable marketing?
there is someone Kosa who wants to join in. So
Yeah, Shandeep. So you want to go
message.
ahead and answer? You want to go ahead and answer it quickly, Mohammed, and then we'll let Shandeep
No, he wants
jump
to
in.
call in. He wants to call in,
Okay.
so I can just go offline and he can come, right?
Okay, you can X yourself out. He'll take a seat,
Yeah.
and Ty will pick up answering the
Okay.
question while Shandeep's taking a seat.
Yeah, so I've been doing these longer term contracts. My most recent, my current one, it was actually a choice that it was actually a hi. It was a job where I negotiated being a contractor instead of being an employee, and I prefer being a contractor. I prefer billing by the hour. If I'm working at night, doing some kind of launch or something, I want to make sure I'm paid for it. And I've worked with people who were on salary and I wasn't. I was being paid the hour, and we were working in the middle of the night, and I know I'm getting paid and they're not really getting paid. So working by the hour has worked out much better for me personally.
But what do you do in terms of like how many billable hours do you look for in a year, and how many non-billable hours are you comfortable with just recognizing this is just the way it is?
So on these really large contracts, so I worked for a number. I've subcontracted through agencies, and basically like for the last 3 years, I've basically been with one exception. I've been subcontracting through agencies, and so agencies are actually they're taking my rate and they're marking it up a lot.
Right.
So they expect me to actually work 40 hours a week, or 35 to 40. Because that's, if I work less, they lose money. So I have to put the time in. And yes, I might work remotely. I might be in Canada. I might go to Europe for a little while, but I'm still working all the time. I work a lot.
All right, and that's another question we'll come back to a little bit later on, is this idea of when you subcontract in W-2 versus 1099. I don't want to jump ahead to that too quickly before Tom and Shandeep get a chance. Shandeep, did you want to talk about something we were talking about previously, or did you want to address the question we're asking about right now with the billable hours and non-billable hours in marketing?
I'm happy to talk about billable versus non-billable hours.
Okay, go ahead.
So I don't really track my time as well as I should, but I feel that there's that might be a classic mistake that we're all making. I did try to do this a couple of times, and I found Toggle was quite good, especially the Chrome extension, which bugs you when you're not tracking your time. It pops up with a notification. You're not tracking your time. Do you want to be doing that? But I found that once I got myself into that habit, it's really difficult because I spend a lot of my time here in London. I'll potentially be going to work in a co-working space, or I'll be meeting a client on site, or at a networking event, and I find it really difficult to track my time when I'm not in front of my laptop. So that's an issue. But recently I've started to try and build in what some agencies do. So I'll break down an invoice in terms of lots of different tasks, but then I'll potentially add 2 hours of project management or little things related to that, which I know that a lot of other freelancers might not do. But another way of getting around that I found is billing for lots of different tasks, but bumping up each task by a small amount so that you're billing your clients for value that they're seeing, and then just adding 15 minutes, half an hour, sneaking it in to get your other bills paid. But it would be great if you could bill clients for every single email and phone call you've got to deal with.
Yeah,
But
I do the same thing. Yeah, I
It's not.
have to round it up or bump it up in some way because I've tried this before. I've tried billing clients for like, you asked me this question, and it took me half an hour to research it, and like, here's your bill. And then they didn't really say anything, but they didn't like it either. And mostly I felt bad about it. And so I tried to make sure that I just adjusted other things to compensate for all the emails and potential phone calls.
That's an interesting thing. And speaking of the rounding up, and Tom, we'll give you a chance to talk here soon, but I don't want to forget the question here. So when you talk about the rounding up, I'd like to also have people address here. I think we've got all men on the call. Do we not have any females join us today? I guess I'm okay if I say you guys, because I think it's all guys today. Any females that'll be watching this on the replay later on, I don't mean to offend you. It's a figure of speech to say you guys, but I am actually talking to a bunch of guys right now. So I'd like to ask you guys, what I do with my hours is I actually bill in 6-minute increments because that's 1/10 of an hour. So it makes it easy for when you're tracking your time. So Ty and Chandeep, if you would say, like, what's the increment that you bill in? Do you bill up to 15 minutes? Or because I've actually got a colleague who says she bills by the minute. She'll bill to the minute. I'm like, forget that. I'm not tracking to the minute. I do it in 6-minute increments. What increments do the two of you use?
I do 15 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do 15 minutes.
Okay. Chandeep, what do you use?
I do quarters of an hour.
So 15. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's nice to keep it really simple when you're billing your client. So
Yeah.
I'll be like, that'll be half an hour. That'll be 25. That'll be 0.5 an hour, 0.25 of an hour. So it's just really easy to add up.
The problem with going anything less than that is that let's say like all you have to do today is like this half an hour thing. Well, you had to rearrange your entire day, just do that little thing. And especially like in the evening, like if you have something like let's say you have production push at midnight, it totally is going to change your whole evening.
Yeah, that's a good point. The reason I had gone to the 6-minute increments is that I feel like it gets it to be a more accurate amount, and then I'm not as concerned about like, I'm just going to round this up to 6 minutes, the next 6 minutes, as opposed to rounding some of the stuff to the next 15 minutes, because then I kind of feel like if that happens a lot of times, that's a lot of extra minutes that are getting rounded. Now, you guys are actually saying that you're using that as a strategy to recover some of your time, so maybe that all kind of balances out in the wash for you. But again, for anybody who's watching this, we've seen some people in the stream here. Yeah, so there's Stephen is saying that he bills in 15-minute increments, but 30 minutes are required. So there's a lot of different ways to handle this, and you got to figure out what works for you. Let me throw it over to Tom. Tom, talk about billable versus non-billable hours and how you go about how much time you're going to be spending.
Well, I don't have much to add. I haven't had to do any marketing because I've had these 2 long, big, ongoing projects. But I tell you, I'm really inspired, really, as of today, to just do a time analysis. And I think one thing that we all have to make time for and factor into what we bill is the amount of time we spend learning new things and staying informed and on top of the technology. I'm a member of Drupalize Me, and I do video tutorials every single day. I wake up every day, and that's the first thing I do is a tutorial. And I really need to I need to know how much time I'm spending doing that every month. And I'm very good about knowing about my billable hours, but I'm not good about the overall non-billable time. So that's really all I have to add. But the time spent, I'm learning Git. I'm learning, I'm constantly learning, and that needs to be factored in. So taken into account. So
absolutely, yeah. That's a good point. Is that you do need to think about what you're doing to keep your skill set up, keep you enough aware of what's going on so that you continue to be marketable. Now, the nice thing though is, as you can do some of these like enterprise level projects, you actually do get a fair amount of time where you get to learn stuff, and it's fair enough to be billing for it as well. I'm not saying that they're going to pay you for watching Drupalize.me videos, although if you're going to mention Drupalize.me, I've got to give a shout out to Chris Shattuck, buildamodule.com as well.
Okay.
Chris is amazing. Chris has got great training stuff, and as I mentioned, I'm putting my curriculum together on Udemy. But as far as keeping track of your non-billable time, what I encourage freelancers to do is that you should actually have some way that you're keeping track of that in timesheets. Not that you're necessarily billing clients for it, but it's going to be helpful for you to know when you're doing your own assessment, like at the end of the year, let's say, and doing your retrospectives, is to look back and say, okay, I made this amount of money this past year. How did I spend my time in the year? Because it's worthwhile to be learning how to do things and to be able to see like, okay, yeah, I only billed whatever, 1,000 hours, but I can actually account for another 750 hours that I'm really proud of the way that I spent. So it's definitely worthwhile to come up with some way to track your time so that you don't end up beating yourself up too much and say, oh my God, I'm such a slacker. How did I do so few billable hours? It might not be that you actually do anything wrong. Shandeep, what did you want to say? You said that you wanted to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really valuable to try and account for all of the meetups and conferences we go to.
Yeah.
But one thing that I did find a little bit tricky was I went to my first PHP conference on Thursday and Friday, and I think it was 5 p.m. just before the final keynote on Friday. I've got a client trying to contact me, getting me some work, another client trying to give me some work, and I in advance told one of them, I'm going to be busy, and I informed them Tuesday night, give me some work by Wednesday morning, and I can get it done by Wednesday evening. Otherwise, I'll be busy for 2 days. And I think the expectations that you're always available, that's a really tricky one. But yeah, this is like a two-pronged conversation. But yeah, it's really tricky to give yourself time to go to a conference because sometimes last-minute requirements come up, and advising your clients enough time in advance that you'll be at a conference and you'll be uncontactable, I think is really tricky, because when a client expects you to be available and there's something urgent going on, it's great. So I've had a client mess something up on a page, wanting me to restore it and then fix some styling on something I actually released to them at the beginning of January, but they just hadn't done proper user testing and realized that something wasn't as they wanted from the agency before. So yeah, a lot of things there to discuss.
I implemented the 4-hour email reply idea. I don't know if I got it from a book or where I got it from, that no email really can, if it's not something it's an emergency, it can wait 4 hours. And because, or else you're going to spend all your time replying to emails and never getting any work done. And if you try to reply within a 4-hour time frame, it really gives you a lot of time. Like in the morning, you can send those emails at lunch. In the afternoon, you can send them at the end of the day, unless it's an emergency. And then with emergencies, I bill double.
Yeah,
that's what I do. If it's like something, and I have other work, and I have, as I said, I have a big contract takes most of my time. If I have another client that's like, this needs to get done right now, I need to compensate for that. I need to charge them double.
Yeah, it's like if you're going to interrupt my workflow, like I'm in the middle of doing something else, like if this is that important for you that I've got to prioritize you, then you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay the emergency rate. You're going to pay the rush rate on this. Is it that important or not? I like the suggestion that you brought up about setting the expectation of how soon you will reply to emails and giving yourself more of a window there so that you don't have to keep doing this context switching. That's a way that we can actually lose a lot of our billable hours, is if we're constantly switching context, jump around from this, jump around to that, jump to the next thing, jump back, and to just try to get your mind back into it and like, oh, now I got to open up this timesheet, and now you can really lose a lot of time that way. Yeah, so we're seeing that. So like checking email twice a day. I've talked with people that are really disciplined about that. I'm sorry, like I'm OCD or something like that. I just can't help. Like I'm on so many things poking throughout the day. Like I could be so distracted. It's terrible how undisciplined I can be. But the idea of like I only check my email twice a day, and besides that, like it's closed, don't even have the email open, but like I've got my smartphone that's hooked up to my email accounts and it chimes when stuff comes through. But talking about doing chunks of time, let's put that into another question that I've got queued up for us here. And Ty mentioned this. So when we look at like how many billable hours you get, and managing your time, one way that you can deal with that is, and this isn't always in your control, that you don't necessarily have the option of longer term contracts. But one way to approach is that when you get on those bigger contracts, those longer term contracts, then you don't have to be spending so much time churning project after project, because you're actually on this project for an extended period of time. Then you don't have the same kind of thing as like, so there's a difference between a big long-term contracts and having a bunch of smaller contracts that you piece together to be able to get your hours in the week. Because when you have a bunch of smaller contracts that you put together, you have a lot of this context switching, and you need to keep all those plates spinning. As opposed to if you have one bigger contract, you only have the one client you have to satisfy, which is nice, because then you don't get into the situation that you have 10 different clients, let's say you're trying to satisfy, and you're trying to hit the priorities for all 10 of those people. When you've got one client, that's one person that you have to hit the priorities for, and you'll keep them happy. If you've got 10 clients, you've got 10 priorities that you have to hit, or you're going to have people that are pissed off at you, besides the context switching. And having a longer term contract, then you spend less time marketing, and you're able to focus more on getting those hours in. So that's the upside of a longer term contract. I'm kind of a weird person that way, though, because when I've been approached by recruiters or agencies, you know, to have me subcontract or do things, or even if I'm approached potentially by clients directly about long-term contracts, I'm a little weird with those kind of things, because like what a lot of people expect with a long-term contract is they say, oh, so you'll give me a reduced rate on this, right? Because you know you're guaranteed the hours. And I'm like, no. Actually, I'm more likely to want to charge you a higher hourly rate if I'm going to promise to be on this contract for this long time, because I'm locked into that rate. I can't increase my rate at this point. And if I know that I'm locked in with you and I've never been, but mostly that keeps me away from these long-term contracts, because when I say I actually want a higher rate so that I promise to work with you for 6 months or a year, a lot of people will back off from that. But that's how I actually tend to approach these longer-term contracts, is like, I'm not giving you a discount. I'm charging you extra, because now I know I'm locked into that whole year, and I don't get a chance to go to other clients and say, well, now my hourly rate is this and that and that. So let me hear from other people what their thoughts are in terms of like how you see the pros and cons, and what your preferences are in terms of, and obviously there's extremes, right? I'm not talking about taking it to the extent of the shorter term contract that you're going to do 4 hours of work for this person and you're going to get the next 4 hours, and that's crazy, right? You need to have a certain minimum duration. Thanks for stopping by, Tom. Somebody else can take Tom's seat if they want to. So give me your thoughts about the idea of longer term contracts versus contracts that are relatively shorter term, and like what you prefer and what you see as the benefits and the drawbacks.
I'm not a fan. Oh, go on.
Oh no, go ahead.
So I think I get bored of doing one long project.
Yeah.
And also, I think similar to many other freelancers, I'm a glutton for punishment. So, you know, it's kind of fun dealing with those smaller clients that need a little bit more help. And for my sins, I enjoy working with charities and social enterprises and very small organizations. And sometimes they're not the easiest to work with because, lots of reasons. But the difficulty there is you've got the gaps between work. So I think I've spent maybe, you could spend like 2 phone calls, 2 emails, a week, 2 weeks trying to get a piece of work approved for budget to be assigned. And by the time it's actually turned up, your scheduling's completely off. And I tend to maybe be juggling maybe 5-6 clients on relatively small sprints. Recently, just for me to approve 6.5 hours of budget for some work, I had done, I put stuff into Basecamp. I've got a meeting arranged in central London, which is an hour away from my house. I've gone and met them, the decision maker above them. And, you know, after all of that, it still took about another 2 weeks for them to find a budget from a different department. And all the time I was having to wait for them. So, yeah, it would be ideal to work with larger clients that are more established. But I think you don't always have that choice. And all of your eggs in one basket with a big client, they could, you know, decide to drop you all of a sudden. You don't have any work anymore. And also you might get stuck with, okay, we're at the end of this sprint. We now need to review and do user testing, or what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it could get a lot longer. So I think those are the challenges of working with the large clients and the smaller clients.
Yeah. Mohammed, we'll give you a chance to ask your question in a second. I know that Ty has got something he wants to say. I do want to respond to something that Shandeep said as far as being a glutton for punishment. When I first started out, you know, it feels so cool to be a freelancer and have people want you to do work for them. And there's this kind of this bit of this ego thing that, like, when I first started out, it was kind of fun and it was kind of cool to be the superhero, the magician, the miracle worker that solves the problems. I outgrew that. I outgrew that quite some time ago. I said, you know what? I don't need to be anybody's superhero. I don't need to be the miracle worker. I don't need that kind of stress anymore. Like, forget that. I'm just some skinny old bald guy who knows how to write code. I'll do the work. You pay me for it. I can't have any more of that stress in my life. So I totally outgrew this, like, oh, it's super cool to have all these clients that I'm juggling and I'm going to jump in and I'm going to save the day for a bunch of people. I just was going to burn myself out doing that. So I've gotten over a bit of my gluttony there and have been able to scale it back a little bit, tamp the ego down a little bit and say, it's kind of nice maybe being a little bit less in demand and having so much excitement in my life. Go ahead, Ty. What did you want to say?
Yeah, I've made the choice to primarily work with large clients and work on large long-term contracts. And the reason why I do that, though, is because I'm comparing this with a job, like a regular salary job, and it's simply more profitable for me to work by the hour. I don't think that jobs anymore are really like stable. Like you can have a salary job, you can be a contractor, you could be you know. It could be you don't know, like that could be it.
Right.
And the nice thing about working as a contractor is that it's perfectly acceptable that you're going to have outside clients and we do extra work. Of course, the downside is I do spend a lot of Sundays and extra evenings and extra time because I'm a little over capacity. I have a little bit more work than I actually can do. But I think that's like job security for me. It's great. I know that if my main project fell through suddenly, that my other projects could keep me and pay the bills. And I have kids and stuff. I have a large overhead. So it makes me feel better. The more work that I have, the more things that are going on. And it's fun also too, especially with big contracts. This is a problem where it's like they've invested in one way of working with Drupal, one way of doing things. It's very specific, and I like doing all the parts. I like being able to do a little design and do a little back end stuff, and that part it's fun. So what's worked out for me is having the one big contract and then having lots of little, or I have two little things going on the side.
So it's funny for me. One of the benefits that I do like about being on a bigger contract, and like I said, I use Drupal as a framework now. I work for enterprise level clients. I make custom web applications for them. And obviously, like, I'm not the only person on that project. It's a big project. And so one of the things that I like that's nice about that is that I do get to say, I'm tired of pushing pixels around. I don't care whether this works in IE, this, that, or the other thing, because I'm not doing the front end. I'm the code monkey. I'm the back end.
Yeah.
You tell me what you need me to spit out. Let somebody else deal. It's not that I don't know how to do theming and I don't know how to do this stuff. It's that I'm actually glad to not have to deal with some of that stuff anymore. Because for me, it was just like, oh, you got to be kidding. Like, I don't care whether it looks the exact. So for me, that's actually what I get as a benefit from the bigger project is that I do get to do more of the specialization and say, this is my part. Somebody else on the project does the other parts. And I get to focus on the stuff that I like more. Mohammed, what question did you want to ask?
Yeah, I wanted to know, do your clients realize that you also have a personal life? I mean, freelancers have
What's that?
there's so much stress in freelancers' life. What do you think? I mean,
all right, so
yeah, it might be off the topic, but I really want to know how you handle this, because as an online freelancer, it's very difficult.
So part of that, I think it depends on how we choose to set expectations. It doesn't have to be It doesn't have to be a nightmare. So it depends how much of a glutton for punishment we are and how much we want to open ourselves up, what expectations we set, and like how far we're willing to go. So that's a lot in our control. I can tell you that it's shifted a lot for me as I've realized that, like, I've been doing this now for how many years? The work isn't drying up. I don't have to panic. I don't have to put myself into these tough situations just to guarantee that I work. Excuse me. There's always going to be more work. So I've gotten much better about setting that boundary with my clients. That's not to say that I'm not working all the time, because then I've got all of my other projects I'm working on that I'm not even getting paid for. But I've gotten better about setting that boundary and helping my clients to understand that, like, this is how many hours a week I'm prepared to work for you. And that's just it. Now, okay, there's emergencies sometimes, but we don't have emergencies every week, much less every day. And I'm just not going to deal with it. And if you're not okay with that, then go find somebody else to do the work for you. Because I just don't do. And obviously, I'm saying it to you guys in a way that's like much gruffer and with a lot more attitude. But I do help my clients to understand that, like, I do have a personal life. I'm not going to respond instantly to the things that you're doing. Another benefit that you can get when you've got a larger project with an enterprise type of client is that very often they do recognize that things take time, and it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and they can actually be better about it. We'll actually come back in a little bit talking about whether you subcontract and whether you work for agencies or not, because that can definitely put a different spin on things. But I actually do make sure, way better than I used to, setting the boundaries with my clients, that, like, just because I've got a smartphone that gets the email that comes through, and I might have my cell phone on pretty much, however many hours a day, that doesn't mean I'm going to be always accessible to you. Ty and Chandeep, what do you do in terms of setting boundaries with your clients?
Yeah, I don't really have boundaries.
I know
will answer email and hip chat at all times of the night. And so the funny thing is, a lot of the people that I work with my big contract, they're probably salaried employees. I don't know, but I'm almost 100% sure. A lot of them are just on a salary. And yeah, they work all hours. I mean, I'm in a different time zone. I know that they must be up in the middle of the night, and I don't know. Some people work hard. I don't know. I mean, I don't have any real solution for it besides my 4-hour thing. Is that I try to answer emails within 4 hours, and I think everyone has a life, and I think that's perfectly normal. I think when you start getting more like, an unanswered email goes over like a day or something like that, I think that's when people might get frustrated. So that works for me. I mean, yeah, I go snowboarding, and yeah, I'm not going to answer an email from work or anything like that. No.
Yeah. Chandeep, what's your story with setting boundaries? I kind of have a hint of what it is, because you mentioned when you were at the PHP conference, so I kind of think I know how you're going to answer this.
Well, I think, so I spoke to you today about having a flu, and I think the flu had me most yesterday and today, but I felt like I wasn't allowed to have a time off to be ill today. And there was a point at a client phone call at 12:30. I just launched a site on the weekend, and this is me working for an agency who have a client. The first client is a social enterprise comms agency. The second one, their client is a social enterprise as well. So it's a bit trickier. But I've just launched a site. There's amends to be done. I gave a really solid summary of what's happened. And then, just trying to be ill. I think it was 12:30, I got a phone call. I didn't get to answer it. 12:50, I got an email. 2:50, I got a text message on my phone saying, "Did you see my email?" And I thought it was a little bit excessive. It was just referring to some minor amends on a user registration form. But this site hadn't started to be promoted yet. And this is something that has not changed for 2-3 weeks. But all of a sudden, it becomes under scrutiny at that last second. And, it's not, I don't think there's always that much you can really do about it in that situation. But yeah, so I had some tea, had some medicine, and made myself well again and brought myself back from the dead, I suppose. But yeah, it was a bit challenging. And then while I was working on that, another client has basically said that I said something about, having a flu and, not really be working today. And about an hour later, I got an email saying, thank you for your work on this project. We're going to take care of it in-house or find somebody else. And, that made me quite upset because for that client, I have dealt with emails and phone calls almost instantly since November. And because they, like both of these different clients, contacted me Friday around 5 p.m., I had Saturday to recover from the conference. And then I caught a cold, which was probably related to all those international people being in one place at one time, all the world's viruses. But yeah, so I'm not too sure if I was prioritizing them correctly or if I should have been taking more vitamin C, knowing I was going to be in conference mode. But yeah, it has been a bit more of a challenging day than normally. But I think generally speaking, outside of this slightly extreme situation, I'll tend to do Monday to Friday, be available from 9 till maybe 6. And then people will understand that I have weekends. But if there's stuff that needs to be done urgently, I think I've almost allowed clients to get into that by saying, oh, I'll work on the weekend. And then I think one client believes that the weekend is to do stuff that they think is urgent. But I think, interestingly, with this whole availability thing, that could change once I become a dad in a month. So potentially I'm going to have to start pushing those boundaries a little bit more and then reclaiming my own time, but potentially losing some of those clients as well.
Yeah.
Because, I was tempted to say, don't text me, unless it's an emergency or things along those lines. But some people just get stressed when there's a client delivery for a new site to be launched. So, hey, hopefully I don't put too many of those near each other, so I had to get a chance to recover. But yeah, there's definitely more crazy hours at the end of a project.
Yeah, you'll have to see how it goes. It's an interesting situation when you have. Is this your first child that you're going to have?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're gonna be going through a surreal experience in the beginning with that child. One of the things that we ended up doing, my wife and I, is we realized that it doesn't make sense for both of us to be absolutely worthless and exhausted all the time. We might as well just let my wife be the one who's exhausted so that I can actually get some sleep, so that I can actually be functional to do things like actually get some billable hours and get some work done and earn some money to pay for all these bills that we're racking up. But then at the same time, you can have that type of defense that kicks in like, oh my gosh, I have a family now, I have a child. I got to make sure to make as much money as possible so that we've got enough of a cushion. So it can be an interesting experience for you to work through, and you're gonna have to sort it out for yourself. I've got a question here about whether I ever subcontract with people when I get overwhelmed. We'll circle back to that question about how we handle our freelance business and whether we're going to do subcontracting. But first, before we talk about whether we do anything with subcontracting with people, I actually want to talk about the question about whether we subcontract for whether they're recruiters or whether they're for agencies. And again, I'll go first just to tee it up. So for me, in the beginning, I pretty much had to take work wherever I could get it. And it didn't matter if that was a recruiter contacting me or it was a shop or some type of an agency or whatever. It's like, sure, I'll do the work. And I understand that you guys want to be able to mark it up, and I'm going to have to be able to take a cut on, I'm going to take a cut in my rate so that you got a little bit of breathing room to mark it up. What I've done more now in terms of recruiters and agencies is I use them as a tool that I can leverage some that helps me continue to bring my hourly rate up, because I've got an hourly rate. And when they contact me, they say, hey, people see me on LinkedIn. Oh, you got a really good profile. Looks like you've got great experience. We'd like to see if you're interested in doing these projects. And I tell them, this is my hourly rate. And even back in 97 through 2001, when I was a contractor and people would want me to do work for them and they discuss W-2 versus 1099, I don't really care whether I work W-2 or 1099, but I have never given a discount on account of the fact that I'm working W-2 and they're paying taxes. I say, whatever, I don't like whatever, then pay me 1099. I'll pay my own taxes. I'm not going to cut my rate just because you're putting me on W-2 and you're paying some of the taxes for me. So that's the way that I've approached that, from the beginning, doing web development, and from the beginning when I was a contractor a long time ago. Oh, sorry, I forget. We've got an audience that's not just in the United States. Okay, so when you work in the United States, the IRS has a way that you pay your taxes. And W-2 means that you're a full-time employee of another company, and they pay a certain percentage of your taxes for like Medicare and Social Security and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you pay a certain amount of your paycheck goes into taxes. But W-2 ends up meaning that the company is putting in a higher contribution. 1099, and thank you for asking that question. I'm so sorry that I forgot about the fact that we can have an international audience here. 1099 means that the company that's paying you doesn't take out any taxes. You bill them, they send you the money, and you're responsible for paying all of your own taxes.
Fine.
And so that's the distinction between those two things. And for me, I don't really care which way I work, but I don't change my hourly rate. The reason that companies will look for a discount on your hourly rate if you're doing W-2 is that they are covering taxes for you on top of that. You pay far less in taxes. And so they kind of look to the person to say, well, reduce your rate because now you're not paying as much in taxes. And I'm saying I don't do that. I say, I don't care. If that's what you're worried about, then have me do it 1099 and I'll pay all of my own taxes. So that's the distinction between those two things. I would imagine in other countries, you've got similar things that have to do with how you go about paying taxes. I don't know if you've got the breakouts or not, but actually that would be something interesting to hear about how when you are going to subcontract through people, how that does compare to when you work directly for a client. So anyway, for me right now, the way that I approach things is, so one of the things that I have as a rule, though, for sure, is I don't want to be too many layers deep in the pay chain. So you've got your client is at the top layer there, right? If I go directly with the client, I'm like at level 2 is what I call it. If I go through a recruiter, I'm at level 3, and that's okay. But I don't like to go through the situation where there's a recruiter who's placing me at an agency to do work for the client, because I'm so many levels deep then that the recruiter wants to get his cut and the agency wants to get their cut. And then like, what rate am I supposed to be charging that the client's going to be paying? So I won't go that many levels deep. I'll either work through a recruiter to work directly for the client, or I'll work for an agency to do work on behalf, of them for a client. But I won't have a recruiter place me to do work at an agency. That's too far down. And then the other thing that I do is now when I'm contacted all the time by people about what my availability is. I tell them, this is my hourly rate. That's it. Like, this is what I charge for doing my work. And I see if they go for it. And if they go for it and they get me on projects, then I know that they're marking it up from there, which lets me know that I've got some more of a ceiling that I can go when I'm going to be charging to do work for clients directly. So go ahead, whoever wants to jump in. Basley, we'll come back to the question about subbing out to other people. So go ahead and answer the question now about, do you subcontract? Do you do it for recruiters? Do you do it for agencies? And whatever your corresponding W-2 or 1099 situation is, talk to that. You want to go, Ty? You're pointing up to Ty, Chani?
Exactly.
Okay.
Where was I approaching this? So the nice thing about subcontracting I've really found is that it opens a lot of doors. And someone is marking up your rate and they're making a bunch of money off the top, but it's work that wouldn't be there otherwise. And sometimes it can be nice. It can give you a buffer in terms of billing. You can have an advocate. You have someone on your side. I've had, when I was a perma temp I worked at Intel, I was marked up. I made about 40% of what I was marked up at, which is exceptionally low, but common. And and everyone I worked with, that's just how it worked. That was pretty normal. And that I would not have gotten that job otherwise. And it opened a lot of doors for me. It was a great stepping stone for me to further my career. So that was, I'm really, really glad that I was able to subcontract. And as far as 1099 versus W-2, it's worked out better for me to work as an independent contractor, as my own business, my own separate tax ID, and keep everything like that separate. In the US, we have this big problem with health insurance. It's a big pain in the butt, but it's very, very expensive. But recently, it is a tax deduction, so it does help out. Your taxes are higher if you work for yourself, but and your health insurance is extremely high, but it does, at least it's tax deductible. Saving up for taxes is really hard. That's a really rough one. I haven't solved that one yet, but it's a lot of money as you make more.
Yeah, estimated quarterly. You got to make sure you do a good job with your estimated quarterly payments. Although honestly, the fine that you get assessed if you haven't quite done it, the fine is ridiculously low. I've got a colleague who actually is a full-time employee for somebody else now. He's been so for a number of years, but when he was a freelancer, he said, I don't even bother making payments. I just do my taxes at the end of the year, and then I just pay the fine. It's so insignificant anyway. I don't even care. Yeah. So he didn't even bother doing estimated quarterly payments.
It's not a good idea, because if suddenly I ran out of work, I would have big trouble with my taxes when it was time to pay that bill. Yeah. So Mohammed or Chandeep, tell us what your situation in terms. So Mohammed, maybe yours is a little bit different because you are working through Freelancer or Upwork or stuff like that. So pretty much there is no such thing as a recruiter or an agency. You're pretty much always working directly with some client that's contracting you through the Freelancer site. So what would you add to the discussion in terms of subcontracting versus working directly with an end client?
I think working directly is good, and we do not pay tax, but we pay commission to freelancer.com.
Yeah.
And so it's different, but it's similar. Yeah.
Okay, and Chandeep, so what is your situation? Because you actually are a freelancer, you do have your own company. So how do you deal with in terms of when a recruiter wants to place you on a contract, or when an agency wants to, or whether a recruiter wants to have you do work for an agency? What's your situation with that?
So a couple of years ago, when I was first starting out, what I used to do was work with recruiters to market my CV to do on-site contract work, like full-time, 2-3 months, things like that. Over time, I think I just started adding too many recruiters on LinkedIn and sending my CV to too many of them, and it became this problem that kept turning into a snowball. You probably don't want to be putting your mobile phone number onto your CV and then putting a link to download that from your LinkedIn profile, because you get recruiters fishing for jobs that don't exist or that are completely irrelevant in countries far, far away, doing skills that you haven't said you do, anything to do with web development. So that's something I decided for this new year I would try and solve. My solution there was deleting all the recruiters from LinkedIn, and each time I got contacted to get them not to contact me anymore. But I think the issue there was me not managing it correctly and dealing with something like 20 different companies, and then maybe 2-3 of those staff from each of them. And it was affecting me just getting bugged too much. But equally, I think I prefer the direct relationship. So I think I'm probably better at creating a relationship than most other developers I know. And I think I really get more of a buzz out of, talking to someone and fixing their problem and doing the problem solving. So at the moment, I will potentially get inbound inquiries and work directly with clients, or potentially like working through an agency trying to deliver a site for somebody else. But I'll try not putting too much of my time into actually trying to contact them, but doing all of the other things that generate a buzz, like organizing a local Drupal user group, blogging, tweeting, and hoping that people can contact me through those methods.
Okay, so a couple more points though about this idea of let's say specifically like working through an agency. So Ty, you mentioned that dealing with recruiters or dealing with agencies, it opens some doors for you, and it can. In certain situations, it gets you in a door that you couldn't have gotten in otherwise, especially like when you look at doing something like here in the United States, there's certain government agencies that need subcontractors, but you have to go through another agency that specifically has clearance, is specifically one of the approved providers for that government agency. So there's certain situations where you cannot do work for a client unless you go through somebody else. So it can open some doors that way. And then it can also open some other doors just because there is the marketing arm that got you in there. But what you have to understand is this non-compete agreement. So yes, it can open some doors, but it isn't necessarily going to become a door that's available to you for doing work on your own and doing the work directly. So that's one thing you need to be careful about when you're dealing with recruiters or agencies, like what type of non-compete agreement you have. And honestly, it's only fair. Like if somebody brings you in to do work on a client, it really isn't ethical to say, well, now I'm going to do an end run around and I'm going to work directly for this client and I'm going to mark up my rate. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a non-compete. You just need to be aware of the fact that that you're going to be dealing with a non-compete. The other thing to keep in mind when you're going to be dealing with agencies in particular is that very often agencies set up a workload and a work pace that's really just grueling and hectic. This is just the way that agencies are. And so you got to be careful about that before you even agree to do work for an agency. Like what are the expectations of delivery timeframes and how many hours I'm going to put in and just things like that. And just know the truth of the matter is that pretty much every single agency, it's pretty demanding and pretty grueling, that they really want you to hustle, and it can be pretty stressful to take on that type of a work. So you just got to be careful about it before you set yourself up for that type of situation. Do any of you want to comment about the non-compete or the stressfulness of working with recruiters or agencies?
It's always a lot of work. I mean, working with an agency is a lot. Yes, there's really tight deadlines. It's a lot of work. Comparing that to working on yourself, working by yourself, working direct with a client, and it's also stressful. It's a tough job.
You want to say anything, Shandeep?
I think I've already overshared in my previous comment. But yeah.
All right, so we've got a question about there that they need somebody to evaluate a Drupal site. I'm just gonna answer this quickly. This is a little bit off topic, so I don't want us to go into it for too long, but I'll answer the question there quickly about looking for somebody to evaluate a Drupal site. You asked whether you should look on Craigslist. I would say that's an absolute no. Anybody who's advertising their Drupal skills on Craigslist is not a good Drupal developer, and you don't want to be using them. Anybody who's good at Drupal is not going to be looking for jobs through Craigslist. So if you find them through there, that's a really good way to cross them off the list. As far as seeking out Drupal developers, one of the things that that I would suggest you do, if there are meetups, if there's a local meetup for a Drupal group, you should start attending those meetups and get to know people there. There's two advantages that you're going to get from that. One is that you get to see people face to face and you get to learn about them. The other advantage is that they get to see you. Any Drupal devs, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make this too Drupal centric, folks. I'll wrap up answering this question here in just a minute. Any Drupal devs that are any good have more work than we can possibly take on. And it's very hard to get a good Drupal dev to have the availability to work for you. But if you go to things like Drupal camps, Drupal conferences, the meetups, and you make yourself visible, they're going to be much more likely to be interested in working on your job because you've shown some type of commitment to the community. So I don't know what time frame you have here. Maybe you're looking for things to be done sooner than that. But still, it's a good idea to look at the Drupal camps, Drupal conferences, Drupal meetups, so you can start finding out about some people. And you're definitely going to want to be looking at what people's profiles look like on Drupal.org, so you can get an idea of how long they've been part of the community, how they contribute back to the community. That's a big thing that I look at when I've worked for clients who needed to hire other people on. Is I say, well, have them tell me what their Drupal nick is. And if they don't even have a Drupal nick, that's not like a really good sign. That's not a good note to start out on. Somebody might be brilliant. They might be spectacular at Drupal, but if they haven't even bothered to create a Drupal nick, they haven't really stepped in, picked up on the whole idea of being part of the community. And community is a big thing with Drupal. So I hope that gives you some answer to your question there about getting the proposals. I don't want to get too far off topic there. Yes, on LinkedIn, there is the Drupal jobs group. There's recruiter groups that you can get into on LinkedIn. LinkedIn can be there's tons of recruiters on LinkedIn who are fishing around profiles trying to find Drupal developers. This project, the main project that I'm supporting right now, the fact of the matter is the CEO of that company did find me through LinkedIn, and he contacted me to see if I would work on his site. And I have been supporting him now for quite some time. So you can do it. It can work for you through LinkedIn, but just know that you've probably got a lot of competition there as well. So you would do yourself a big, big, big favor by getting to be a part of the community and connecting with people through the community. We're at, we've been going about 2 hours right now. I'm going to take a look at questions to see what else we may have here so that we can see about starting to wind some things down. And please, please, I hope that this is actually successfully being recorded. I know that I got a notification from Blab that my replay is now available, and it'd be a horrible shame if we weren't recording this, because this has been awesome. So I want to thank everybody for asking your questions. Thank everybody who's been participating. We'll look for a few more questions here to see if we can answer some more stuff and wrap up this awesome Drupal chat. I will definitely do more of these types of things. I do it every week. This is a weekly thing that we've got going on. Let me look at some questions. I forget, somebody asked about who's attended DrupalCon and who is at DrupalCon Asia. We can talk about that a little bit, because that actually even does tie into the idea of being a freelancer. Again, not to make it too Drupal centric, I would imagine if you're on other platforms, you've got similar types of things, conferences and camps that you might go to. So let's see what else I had here. Okay. So a couple of questions that I think are worthwhile wrapping this up with here is, so the idea of being a freelancer and, once you kind of get the pump primed, getting more work. I'd like to hear from people about how much repeat business you get and how much word of mouth business you get. So I'll just really quickly tell my experience here of what it's been like. So for me, I get a decent amount of repeat business from clients, although what tends to happen with that is it's kind of unpredictable. So I mentioned there's a client who I am going to be starting another project for. I did a website for him. I think it was in 2012. Maybe it was 2013. It was definitely not 2014 or 2015. So here's a client that I did some work for, and now he's coming back to me in 2016 saying, hey, I have another website that I want to do. So the repeat business can be, let's see, I'll come back to the comment that's here about the demotivating statement. The repeat business that I get from clients is something that's, it's a little bit tricky, because while it may come, it may not come for some time down the road. As far as the word of mouth, I cannot say that I could point to a whole lot of projects that I've gotten as a result of somebody talking to somebody else saying, oh, you should hire Mark. And that might seem maybe a little bit of a concern, like, well, why aren't you getting word of mouth, Mark? Like, aren't you any good at this? If you're good, you should be getting word of mouth. I am good at this.
Same here.
But like, I can't say that I'm getting a ton of word of mouth. And yet, I'm telling you, it seems like somehow, once you have a certain amount of Drupal experience, and I'm sorry, maybe it's the same with other frameworks as well. It seems like there's some type of karmic thing that happens in the universe that somehow, like, these energy waves go out, and people are just able to sense the fact that, like, you have experience and you're good at this, and you just get contacted by more people. And that's honestly what happens with me mostly. That's where I get a lot of my work, is just new people contacting me to find out, hey, are you available? Can you do work for us? So that's my experience. Why don't you guys talk about repeat business, word of mouth, or however all the next project comes through that keeps you busy?
Go ahead, Ty.
Okay. Yeah. So I did, when I first started out, I did like flyers, and I handed out like little brochures, and had people put those at different kinds of events that were completely unrelated, just in hope of finding people. Um, um, but most of my stuff has actually been from Drupal jobs, or from just other job sites. Actually, word of mouth. Yeah, I've had some things from word of mouth, but I think when you're really focused on Drupal, there's only so many Drupal sites out there. And yes, they tend to be big. They tend to be enterprise sites. They tend to be highly functional. But there's only so many people who know somebody else who has a big Drupal site. So I think it's maybe there's not as much word of mouth in Drupal. I'm not sure. But that's been my experience, at least, is that most of it has been, I've had to actually go and look for stuff. LinkedIn has never actually worked out for me. I've followed all kinds of recruiter leads, and a lot of those have ended up to be like dead ends. They were like falsely advertised. It was a Drupal job, but then it turned out it wasn't really a Drupal job in the end. I've wasted a lot of time actually with recruiters on LinkedIn. I think other people have had the same experience. I wouldn't give up if I didn't have any work or something and a recruiter contacted me. I would still reply, and I would still kind of go through all the steps. But so far, my experience has been that great.
Okay, so one thing I want to say about word of mouth, though, is big sites. I don't know how hooked in you are with Drupal meetup groups or Drupal camps, Drupal conferences, or how much you're on IRC. I haven't been on IRC like for so long. I used to totally be on IRC all the time. One thing that I will say in the Drupal community, like you're saying word of mouth, you don't think there's so much word of mouth,
right.
And there's only so many projects?
I'm not talking about camps and cons.
Yeah.
That's a little different. Yeah.
When you got in a reputation in the Drupal community, when you're one of those people, pretty much you've got the safety net. They don't let you fall. They make sure you get your next job. So they're actually, when you can get plugged into the Drupal community the right way, like you're pretty much golden. Like all that has to happen is somebody needs to, you just make the slightest peep that like you're available. And then you got all these people that are hooking you up with your next project. So there actually is a way that you can get good word of mouth. I can't say that I've ever fallen into that situation myself, but it can happen. That's another type of word of mouth that you can get. Shani, what's your experience in terms of repeat business, word of mouth, or getting new work? What are you finding is the situation for you?
Well, I think what you mentioned about karma was quite interesting, especially with DrupalCon Asia just happening in Mumbai. But I think that recently that's kind of happened to me, maybe around October. There was this point at which there's a bunch of inquiries for the first time from direct clients. So I must have done something right. But I think I did also try and go crazy the last 2 years and go to every single camp in the UK. And I went to Drupal Developer Days like a year ago and did like 4 core commits in Drupal 8. And, I was ticking all those different boxes to try and get myself hired more easily. But I think the difference is my skill set, being a site builder and front ender. I think the demand is for specialist back-enders and specialist front-enders, which makes it slightly more challenging. So I've been trying to do all of those other bits. But with repeat business, having smaller clients, it's a little bit trickier, or I'll potentially launch a site and find it hard to sell additional work, even if I can find a bunch of things for them to do. They just won't want to sign up on budget. But yeah, I think recommendations really work. And what I'm trying to do to make sure repeat business and recommendations happen more is by gathering case studies and testimonials, and definitely doing more in terms of customer service. So if I've got that email come in, I'll sometimes enjoy replying within 5 minutes if I can, even if it's a really short reply, or trying to build a better client relationship just to make happier clients that can then recommend you better.
Yeah. So Mohammed, with you being on, now I don't think you're doing Fiverr, but with you being on Upwork and Freelancer, your situations would be a little bit different. So tell us about, are you finding, how is more work coming to like the next gig and the next gig and the next gig through these freelancing sites? What is, is it like our previous clients leaving reviews and that helps you turn up higher in the search results on here? What's your experience with working through these freelance sites?
It's been many years I'm working online, and now I have built the trust, and I do get repeat clients and repeat business. But word of mouth doesn't work for me. I mean, I go to freelancer.com and I bid on projects and I get new clients or new projects. So 80% new projects and I have 20% repeat clients. Yeah. I have some
Okay.
regular clients on Skype and they hire me regularly, but I have to go to find new projects on freelancer.com on daily basis. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I did understand. I went back this question that was asked, and it actually looked like you were about to take a seat, and then you changed your mind. I promise we don't bite. We'll welcome here, Salman. You're welcome to come on in if you want to. But I did look at your question that you asked here, and I understand what you're asking about the statement about clients preferring companies over individual freelancers and in a large project. So. It depends on what type of project you are looking for. If you're getting these enterprise level projects can be a tricky thing as a freelancer because you don't necessarily have the resources that are going to be available to help out this project. And so that is an advantage that companies can have, is that they're able to show agencies like Drupal, like web dev agencies are able to show we've got all these people on the bench, and so we've got all this extra capacity if you got into a crunch. Whereas when you're a freelancer, it can be trickier getting these bigger companies to hire you because of the fact that they may be concerned, like, are you going to be able to follow through? And then another concern that they may have is that they may say, look, I don't really want to have all of these individual contracts. Like, I'm going to hire 20 different devs to work on this project. Forget, I don't want 20 contracts and have to manage 20 different people. I'd rather hire an agency who's got these 20 devs as employees, and now I just deal with the agency and I let them deal with the resource issues. So there, depending on the projects you're looking for, there is going to be a certain amount of a bias towards working with companies and agencies rather than working with freelancers. But other times, like I'm telling you, I don't want to mention the name of the company right now because the site's not ready to launch, and I don't want you looking at their existing site and say, oh my God, that's the project you're working on, because that's actually not the project I've been working on. It's been behind the scenes and really nobody has seen it yet. But this is a company that actually has chosen not to go the agency route. I think they tried doing that and they just found it wasn't a good experience for them, and they've actually sought out people individually. So
I think
it's
that's
not
more and more.
Yeah, it's not a given that you don't stand a chance if you aren't a part of an agency. But even when it's something with an agency, I'll give you a chance, Ty. Even when it's with an agency, you can still find some agencies that need to hire some subcontractors to help them fill some gaps. So if you're finding that you're running into that situation that you can't get hired because you're just a one-person shop and people aren't willing to trust you, then I'd see about doing a little bit of networking to act as a sub for some other agencies. Go ahead, Ty. What were you going to say?
I think that right now there might be a tendency, at least, okay, I've noticed this with these big enterprise organizations, to actually have their own dedicated team, and it's sort of like an internal team, except it's not an internal team at all. It's contractors. There might be employees of maybe other agencies, but these teams are not in the traditional like agency model where they're and I think they found that it's cheaper, but mostly it's more effective because they get a lot more control. When you just hire a single agency to do everything, for a new site build, that makes sense. When you're talking about a site that's constantly evolving and changing, that control is extremely important. And I think a lot of big organizations are kind of going the direction of having these sort of like internal, external, dedicated teams. That's been my experience, at least. And I can see why. It makes sense.
Shandeep, what's your experience being? I'm assuming that Oh, sorry. And I said that we would come back to this idea of whether we would subcontract. So you can ping me again if I forget to come back to that. We'll finish up with that one. Chandeep, what's your experience with being somebody who's got pretty much your own company? And I'm assuming it's a one-person company. Are you finding much of the resistance getting jobs because you're just one person, or are you not finding that is presenting an issue for you? And maybe your situation is different, because I guess you're saying that some of the clients you like to work for, you like to work on some of the smaller projects anyway. So what's your experience with that? Oh no, we've lost your sound.
Well, his answer. I need to drop off for a few minutes here.
Go ahead.
But I'll be around.
Great. Yeah, we've lost your sound, Chandeep. It was working great before. It was perfect. We were hearing you crystal clear. Yeah, we'll go ahead and give Salman a chance to jump in here now. Give you a chance to get in the seat there. While we're seeing if you can figure out your sound, Chandeep. Mohammed,
Yeah.
tell us about the people who are hiring you through Upwork. Are you finding that you're being hired by large projects, enterprise type of projects? Or are you finding that you're being hired more for like the solopreneur or like family owned type of jobs? Salman, I don't know if you're on Chrome or not. Right now it's not getting a connection here. If you're using a browser other than Chrome, see about bailing out and try using a different browser. We'll give you a chance to connect there. And if it doesn't connect, I'll actually X you out so that you can have a chance to connect again. We'd love to have you take a seat. Go ahead, Mohammed. So what types of projects are you getting then?
Most of my clients are small businesses, and most of the projects are fixing the websites. Or nowadays there are security issues a lot, and most of the time they come and they say, oh, my website has been hacked, and these type of projects. So so these are the major projects nowadays, and so that's all.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I just can't resist the opportunity to take a swipe here. Before Mohammed came on air, he wanted to know whether this was, oh yeah, I know Drupal get-in. Drupal get-in's long past, Chandeep. Forget about that. Whatever happened with that, that's in the past. And anybody that got hit by that just wasn't paying attention, because they had big advance notice about, we're going to have a core security update. Be ready to update your sites on this date. So anybody who didn't update fast enough just they weren't paying attention to what they needed to do. And besides the fact, that would ruin my whole swipe at WordPress here. So before Mohammed had come on air, he asked if this was Drupal specific or if it could be Freelancer general, because he said he tends to specialize in WordPress sites. And you hear what he's mentioning is he's saying a lot of the work that he gets is that my site has been hacked, come and fix it. And so I just got to say, this is so typical with WordPress sites. WordPress sites are getting hacked all the time. And I'm not saying there's anything that it's the fault of WordPress core. It probably has to do more with the plugins.
Yeah.
Well, Drupal tends to be pretty secure. Drupal will have some of the Chandeep is saying, "Don't take a swipe at WordPress." I know, but I can't resist. I gotta take a little bit of that. Yeah. It probably is more so. It has to do with the plugins that people are writing, and it's the plugins that have more of the vulnerabilities than the core code that has the vulnerability. And another thing, in all fairness, that like, a lot of people who are using WordPress are going to be the smaller types of shops. Like, oh, I'm just an individual blogger, or like a 1 or 2 person company, and they don't necessarily know about doing the things that they should do to keep their site secure. Whereas a lot of entities that are using Drupal are going to be more of the sophisticated entities, and they are going to be more careful about doing things to take security measures. So Drupal does get a bit of an advantage just from the fact that its user base will tend to be more sophisticated and less likely to be hacked. Although nothing is completely invulnerable. Okay, so Yeah, we'll see if anybody feels like jumping in. What I'll do here, otherwise, seeing not having any other questions in the stream, if people want to ask their last questions as we wrap this up, I'm going to go back and address one question that somebody had asked earlier about, and I don't know if this person is still online or not. I hope you're still online now that I'm getting back to it, but even if you're not, it's still worthwhile answering the question about whether I subcontract work when I get overwhelmed. And this is
New
something.
Spark Designs has a good point. WordPress is targeted because it's more often used. Right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So in fairness,
Yeah.
WordPress has like an order of magnitude more sites installed than Drupal has. So it's the same way is that like Windows, it is more targeted than the Linux distributions are because there's more Windows installations, and so it just really isn't worth it to people to try to target a smaller base. So that's true as well. Is that there's so many more WordPress installs that it's just going to be that much more likely that people are going to target WordPress sites. And so anyway, so answering the question about subcontracting out. So Salman is going to try to get back on again. We'll see if he's able to make it. He made his point. It looks like you're actually going to make it in this time. Maybe you rebooted with Chrome. So my answer about subcontracting, part of what I've done to build my success is my reputation and how good I am at this. If I subcontract out my work to somebody else, then I'm potentially damaging my reputation if that person doesn't do the programming up to my standards. And honestly, I don't want to spend my time having to supervise other people and make sure that they're doing the work properly. I'm not really interested in getting to be a manager and running a web dev shop. I actually like being a one-person shop and doing things on my own. I've been approached by offshore type of companies. Hey, look, you got a great profile. I bet you're really busy. You could take on even more projects. You can ship some of the projects off to us. I've gotten approached by people when I've been on IRC. I've been approached by people on LinkedIn coming to me saying, hey, like if you have extra work and you want to send some of it off to me, I'm happy to do that for you. And for me, that's not the route that I want to go. To me, that's something different from being a freelancer. And I don't really want to go down that avenue because it puts a completely different set of responsibilities on me that I'm not really interested in getting into. Now, Chandeep is raising points. I'm not saying, this is me personally, okay? I'm speaking to me answering the questions. I'm not saying whether anybody else should do it. And like with somebody like Mohammed's sitting here on the call, he may be sitting there thinking like, Mark, dude, what's your problem? You could sub out to me and I would do a good job for you. Don't have an attitude about whether you're going to sub to somebody or not. So this is a personal decision you'd have to make. And Chandeep is saying that he does actually sub out some of his work. And I guess he's actually he's talking specifically with some of the things. He's actually talking about the case where they can do the work faster than he can do it. He's saying he subcontracts back-end work. I guess maybe you're not a back-end developer. For me, I'd actually probably be more likely to need to subcontract front-end work because that's just not my area of specialty. I'm a back-end guy. So in that situation, it could actually be a good idea that you find somebody else to sub to who's going to be better at that work than you are. Yeah, let's swap work. That's an interesting thing to data entry. Oh, gosh. Yeah, I know. Create the content on the site, some of that type of stuff. But I do want to give other people a chance to talk about it. Salman, you were finally able to connect. Let me give you a chance to talk. What do you want to say?
Nothing as such, but I think it's definitely a risk you shouldn't subcontract work. As it has happened to me twice. I was busy with other stuff and I got a project with a client with which I have already done more than 10 projects. So I outsourced that project to another guy, and he was definitely a good guy as well. He was good at work. I have tested him twice before, but suddenly at that time he got failed. And as I'm working on Upwork, so definitely I got a negative review, and it dished my profile for I guess a month.
It's very risky.
Yeah. Okay, so even Mohammed's saying it's and Mohammed's a freelancer. Like he's on Freelancer and Upwork. Like this is the type of work he's looking to get.
I like to do everything on my own. I don't trust anyone, any other. I cannot give it to someone else. I mean, if he doesn't complete, then my client will be angry with me, and he will never hire me again.
Exactly.
So it's good to be one-man company.
I think saying no to a work is better than getting a negative review.
That's what I feel like. I'm really not interested. For me, doing this work is about more than just the money. the money is good. I make good money doing this, but I'm not doing it just for the money. I'm not looking to say, oh, let me see how many projects I can churn. Let me bring on some more people. Since I've got this reputation and I've got all these projects coming to me, let me try to outsource that to some other people so I can make more and more money. Because I'm not doing it just for the money. I'm doing it because I like doing this stuff. I like doing this kind of work. And like you say, I don't want to run the risk that I'm going to try to be greedy and I'm going to try to bring in some more work here, but then I damage my reputation. And then the long-term impact that it has is I end up having less and less work. I'd rather say no on a project than say yes and not have it be done well. And I do that with clients as well when they contact me. Anytime somebody contacts me to see if I can do work for them, I'm totally honest about what my skill set is because I don't want to upset my clients. I'd rather not take a job than take a job and have somebody angry with me. I'd rather pass on it. Even if maybe I would have been perfect for it, if I have any doubts, I'd rather just suggest to the client, I don't think I'm the best fit for you on this one. I think you should look to hire somebody else here. Cause like the strategy that you should take is under promise and over deliver. You can't go wrong doing that. But if you try to take on too much and you just royally screw it up, that could have long-term negative consequences for you. So it's something that you got to be careful about. And I can feel for the people. I can tell you, I've been contacted by a lot of different people, especially when they hear how busy I am, how swamped I am, and they say, well, why don't you hire me to do some of the work? And I try to tell them, as considerately as possible, like, I don't really do that. I'm not interested in this. Isn't anything about you. It said, I don't really like to do that, but I can totally understand where people come from. Because when I was first getting started and I heard these people who were doing project work and saying how swamped they were, and I didn't have anything, I said the same thing. It's like, well, then send some of your work to me because I don't have anything right now and I'd be happy to take it. So I totally understand when people are asking those questions and why they would look for somebody who is busy to do that type of thing. At the same time, I think when you're somebody who's in that situation, you have to be able to understand the other side of the coin that we're talking about. It's like, I've worked hard to build up my reputation here. And like, I don't know who you are. And I just don't want to take that risk. You need to be able to establish a relationship with people. And one of the ways to do that is to get to the meetups, get to the camps, get to the conferences, participate in things where you get that face-to-face or whatever. It doesn't matter whether it's WordPress or Joomla or Drupal or Laravel or Symfony or whatever. Do something to get involved in the project and actually get some commits on the project. Contribute some code to that project where people can get a sense that you do know what you're doing. And I know that's different if you're a front-end person. You may not have the same ability to contribute that way, but there's still stuff on GitHub where you could be participating with some of the front-end frameworks. Do something to build up something of a reputation for yourself so that people will have more of a comfort level with bringing you on to do work for them, assuming that the person's even comfortable with that at all. Chandeep, good job getting starting up writing your first custom module. I know it, like when you first do that type of a thing, it may seem like this whole overwhelming task. It's not too hard once you get your mind around it. And I'm sure it's the same way with whatever platform you're using. Go ahead.
Yeah. Have you ever worked with a long distance client?
I've got to think about what's the furthest distance I've been from I've certainly, most of my clients, are from out of state. But as far as what the longest distance,
States, right?
Yeah, I don't know if any of my clients that I've done work for have been located outside of the United States. I think all of my, North America, I should say. I think all of my clients have been in North America.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't gotten any projects in the UK or Italy or Europe, like any places.
So you don't have to
like
worry about
that.
time zone as well, because here in Pakistan we have to work at night to serve the clients in USA?
Yeah. So what I have experienced though, and like I don't want to be obnoxious, I don't want to insult you, Mohammed, but like when I work or Salman, anybody else who's out there, one of the things that when I work with clients who are in North America, I tell them like this whole thing of dealing with the time zones, dealing with outsourcing this and offshoring it can become a real challenge on a project to get things done, because here, you're awake during these hours and you need to have something done. But meanwhile, your resource may be asleep. So you send an email or you put it in whatever you're using, Trello or Wrike or Basecamp or whatever tool you're using, but you put something in there and then you go to bed. And then your developer's awake while you're sleeping. And now they look at what you said in there and then they try to go do what you thought that you wanted. And then they go to sleep. And then you wake up and then you look at what they did and it wasn't right. They misinterpreted what you needed. And so this whole thing with the time zones can become a really big problem. And so when I'm working with clients and they're thinking about like, oh, we could save so much money by doing somebody who's in India or who's in Pakistan, I say, well, it doesn't necessarily work out that way, because a lot of times there's communication issues. It's just hard the communication isn't good, that things are misunderstood. There's time zone issues. And so dealing with people across the big remote distances can be a very tricky thing. Mohammed, it sounds like what you're doing is that you've adjusted your clock so that you are awake when they're awake, and that at least you can deal with the time zone issue.
Personal life and working life. I mean, I have 2 kids and it's hard, but we have to do it.
Yeah, well, you're making that sacrifice. And I know that there are some other people that making that sacrifice as well. Salman, I don't know what time zone you're in here. Where are you located?
I am from Asia, Pakistan.
Okay, so you are also in Pakistan. So I've got to look at your profile. I guess you said you're a Drupal developer and a bootstrapper. Are you a one-person shop? Are you a freelancer? What type of work are you doing?
I'm basically a co-founder Drupak. Drupak is the official firm registered with Drupal.org. That is the only firm based in Pakistan.
And where are your clients then? Are pretty much all of your clients?
So we have some of them are local, but mostly abroad. And we do take projects from Upwork, Fiverr, and People Per Hour. Okay.
All right. And so
but I think if you're working online, time zone isn't an issue. You can even do work like all day even. So in my 5-year career, I haven't faced that time zone issue up till yet.
Okay. So it's going to depend on the person. Like Mohammed's dealing with it by adjusting where he's awake. So he's awake during the time that his clients' hours are their normal business hours. And you've obviously made some adjustments as well. So you're saying that you aren't dealing with that time zone issue. I can say though that I've been on a number of projects and we've tried this, and they're big projects. We need a lot of resources, and we've just run into those issues that it hasn't worked well using people who aren't approximate, with our time zone to be able to get things done. So it's, it's I guess your mileage may vary type of thing, and it depends on your situation. I've got a question here about whether there's a standard contract that we use with our clients. I'll answer that quickly. I had done some work to put together a contract that I thought would be a good type of framework for a contract to use with people. I had used that some. I've had other projects where the client had their standard contract they wanted me to sign, and I've looked at it. What I've actually moved more towards, just having had my experience of contracts that I have enforced in a court of law, and I still am out all of this money, I'm not so much focused on the contracts anymore as I am on doing more of the assessment of like, can I trust this people, this employer? Does this employer trust me? Are we able to communicate with each other in a way that things are clear so that I know that things are likely to go well? So there was a period of time that I was really looking towards oh, I'm going to put together this standard contract that I'm going to use. And I moved away from it just from having gotten into the situations where the contract didn't end up doing anything for me anyway. I was like, forget it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do contracts, folks. I'm just saying that the way that things have worked out for me, I personally have moved away from contracts. Mohammed, I'm going to guess that you don't get to write the contract anyway, that's done strictly through your Freelancer and your
Yeah.
Upwork site, right?
Everything is
Okay,
under
so you don't have a
contract.
choice in the contract. You have to use the contract. So Solomon, let me ask you, like, what do you do in terms of your contracts? Do you have a boilerplate contract that you use?
No, nothing as such.
Okay, and is that because you
Upwork.com,
are...
Freelancer.com, they handle most of the things. So I think we don't have to worry about that.
They have each portal. They have their resolution center, and they do track stuff, but not that regularly. But if there is something involved between the client and the developer, and they do raise point. So if they raise point, then they take charge of it, and they read all of the task and the initial job requirement and the final completion. So if they do not mismatch, so they according to all of those situations, they can decide.
Okay,
They have
But
so...
queue system.
I have a very good question about
Okay.
this thing, that in my 4 to 5 years of online work, I'm been successful till now, and I'm enjoying it a lot. Like I earn $4,000 to $5,000 each month.
In
But I'm not,
Pakistan, you're earning 4,000 to 5,000 in Pakistan.
yeah, each month.
You're a wealthy man in Pakistan. That's a lot of money in Pakistan.
Exactly. But I'm worried, like last week, a guy told me that let's suppose Upwork.com demolishes. What will
Oh my
happen?
God.
What will be your
Please.
career? If Fiverr.com demolishes next month, who are you then? All of your reviews are gone. Everything is gone. You have to start from zero. So he advised me to start working with an agency. Find a job for you. So I think, seriously, then I got into thought that if I'm doing this thing, can I carry it till like 15 to 20 or 25 years down the line, or not? And let's suppose if something like Fiverr demolishes, or let's suppose they ban my account for some reasons. So
Okay, so let me tell you what I would say about that. As far as this idea of putting all your eggs in one basket, and what if, because like, let me try to keep it on topic. I don't go on too much of a tangent. I won't give you that specific example that I was going to mention, but what I would say to you is, you want to, there are things that you can do to build your online presence, to build people's awareness of you, so that you aren't so dependent on just the one platform. And I haven't ever done work through Elance or Olance or Freelancer or Updesk or Upwork or People by the Hour or anything like that. I've never had a need to do any of those sites. That's not how I market myself. So I can't speak with any type of intelligence about how stable and how much you could rely on those channels of getting work for you. So I don't know if you're okay saying, hey, I'll just go for it. And if that one closes, then I'm sure there's another one that's going to open up and I'll just go through there. But what I would suggest is that you need to be building your presence through some other channels as well. So what I keep saying, Drupal camps, and please, I'm only using Drupal as an example. Whatever the framework is that you use, Drupal camps, Drupal conferences, going to meetups, find people on Facebook. Look for Facebook groups where they talk about what you want. Get yourself on Quora or LinkedIn. You need to find some other avenues where you can get exposure for yourself, so that if some things fall through, you've got other places that you have some context that you've been cultivating, and then you can put some of the pieces together there.
Say something.
Go ahead.
Okay. This is the same thing I'm going through nowadays. Recently, elance.com has closed and Upwork has taken the charge of it. and this question came to my mind as well. So the best thing is to have your website, have your portfolio online, and build your clients as much as you can, because this thing can happen. It can happen anytime. I hope it doesn't happen, because Salman is making very good money.
Yeah.
but you have to have your portfolio and clients ready, so you can work with them even after that.
Yeah, and that's a comment in the stream as well, that Brian said that same
Since
thing,
one
that
month
always
I'm
keep a
trying to
portfolio of your
build.
work.
Yeah.
Well, you can, I think if you have contacts, even I have most of them. I have that ideology that make your customer your fans, basically. So I do have most of them on Skype. But let's suppose if something happens, they will be with me, but I
Yeah.
cannot make more.
Okay,
I
it's
cannot
good.
make more.
I'd like to welcome another person who just took a seat. I'd love to say your name, but you didn't put your name in your profile. I only know you as lead developer. So go ahead. What did you want to say? Introduce yourself.
It's Sean. That's my name, guys. Thanks for having me. I was wanting to follow up with Shaman's, if I said that correctly. Comment. I too, as a developer, independent, do a lot of freelance work. And initially, that was my bread and butter. I primarily just waited till the client came to me and I fulfilled their order, and then they were gone. That was it, you know. And I waited till they came back, or they sent the reference to me, and that was my business model. Eventually, that kind of got old to me, because the ebb and flow of your intake of how much you're making every month. So I created a new model in that I created almost a subscription model, in that I began taking over your hosting, your domain, and basically created the relationship. So any aspect almost became a full, I won't say not a full stack developer, but just a one-stop shop. So anything that you basically needed, we had it for you, but I didn't sell you anything. It was almost everything was a subscription. If you needed a website, if you came to me basically for a website, I'll develop you a website, but we're also going to get some reciprocal income on hosting that site. And then we're also going to have a maintenance package, and we're also going to have a domain hosting. You know, we're going to take over all that for you. And that way I use that to kind of I expand my model, you know, just to build on what Mark said. Definitely creating your network, but then also create that reciprocal income coming. So then you could weather the storm when things go a little slow. And actually, I'm starting to make more now on my subscription models than I'm bringing in on just new client development almost.
So what kind of clients are you taking on, Sean? Like what's the typical work you're doing?
Small businesses to beginning businesses, I guess. Some of the business that I have, I think they're coming in at maybe $1 million plus. So I can't really say it. They may be mid-range, in between the middle business and maybe going into a corporation stage. And that's kind of, word of mouth has definitely helped with that. But my primary income is, the segment of my income that I see growing a lot more are a lot of the small businesses that are just coming out the ground. And as far as my subscription model, I'm really able to segue and help these guys out. With my larger clients, I'm even starting to reach into IT support. So when they begin having issues with software or anything, I have a guy that it's small, but it's growing faster than everything else I have. And he'll basically patch into them when they call up. It's like a help desk that we've kind of created. And we provide, basically, he covers 12 hours a day, Monday through Thursday for me. And, and it was an extension of me basically starting off doing some web development, because everybody knows if you're doing web development for a small company or for a friend, you are the local IT expert. So their computer can go down for you. There's anything that happens, you're the person they're going to ask what's going on. Yeah. And so in extension of that, I just built on that momentum, and I just started saying, well, listen, I've crafted up some little marketing ads thing. Took me about a day to do that, and already it's bringing in, at the moment they start asking questions, I give them a quick answer, and then I shoot them this package that we have. And so far, we had a couple clients jump into it. So, it's fun being a freelance. It's Freelancer, it has its struggles, of course.
So Chandeep asked you a question about, and we're almost at 3 hours here, folks. Like, I'm totally breaking rules that I have for how I normally do blabs. I try to make sure that blabs are like 90 minutes. This has just been so much fun to have people participating. We'll do this more. Like, I do this every week. I want us to start wrapping it up here. Chandeep did ask you a question though, Sean. So let's give you a chance to finish up with that question, and then we're going to call it good because we're about to hit 3 hours. How do you market how do you market to your clients, and how do you do the project management? I guess he's asking specifically, like, with the fact that you've got like this subscription model and you've changed the way that you're doing business. So I guess he's curious how you shifted into this type of a model where you're doing that subscription base.
Okay, so basically I built upon now let me back up, like probably most of everyone here. I have about 4 years experience of freelancing. So in that time, I've built up a huge email list of people I've done work for, people who contacted me who didn't follow through on it. I just have people that's always been involved in it. So when this new model basically came out of me offering a subscription base and helping them really, what I term, take their website to the next level, I sent this marketing packet out to everybody on that list, you know, and my purpose was primarily just to get them to contact me back, which basically happened. While selling them on this, the worst thing for an e-commerce site to happen, or for any company that rely on the internet as their point of contact for their clients, is for that site to go down. And I hate to say it in these terms, but because it is a fact, their site can go down. I just enhanced the fact that there is a possibility your site can go down if you do not have somebody updating it. More than half my clients run off of WordPress. WordPress with so many plugins and so many updates coming, it can easily for an update to come out and cause a hiccup in your site. So basically, what I'm selling is that you will not have to worry about that if that occurs. Yeah. We're on the team. We'll take care of it. And if it occurs and we miss it, we're available 24/7. Just touch us at 1 in the morning, 7 in the morning, 7 at night. We're going to reply to you. So and a friend of mine called me this, and I mean I don't know how to even take it, but he basically said that I'm just playing on people's fear. And I don't think I am. I think honestly, it's a fact that it could happen. My marketing material just happens to enhance the fact that it can happen. And so people feel secure once they can have reliability. That's the one thing that they will pay for. People will pay for reliability and consistency. And that's what we try to push through our marketing material. So that's kind of how we generated. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of how we tried to. We built that model.
Did he catch you? Did he feel you? Did he get you there, Chandeep? Was he spot on, or do you need to follow up, and does he need to get you a little bit more information there? He's
happy
good. Yeah, he said he's
happy.
All right, great. Well, we're gonna wrap it up here. I thank you to everybody who was watching live for asking questions. Thank you to everybody who took a seat. This was a great chat. I'm curious where some of you found out about me, whether it was through LinkedIn or through the Twitter account. Spread the word so we can get more people participating in these types of things here. It's just a great opportunity for people to connect and share ideas. Been a whole lot of fun. So I do them every week, and I keep them scheduled just so people know when to expect them. I do them on Mondays. They're at 1 o'clock my time. I'm in Greenwich Mean Time -7 hours, just because I had to pick some time to do them consistently. So that's when I've been doing them. If people got in touch with me and I found out there was another time that would be better for other people, I'm not wedded to the idea that it's going to be that time, but I just had to pick some time to get the ball rolling here. So anything else aside, we would just keep it on Mondays at 1 p.m. GMT -7 hours. So we'll go ahead. We'll call it good here. I don't know if anybody's able to stop the recording at this point. I don't have the ability. Oh, I'd have to just make you guys co-host. So I think I'm just going to need to X everybody out so that we can bail out and stop the recordings here? Oh, you can. You're still here. Okay, cool. Yeah, you can go ahead and just you can pause the recording for us because we pretty much wrapped it. This is